Hello, and welcome to this meeting of the welcome to this meeting, this special council meeting. It's May 23rd, 6:30 p.m. And we have regrets from Councillor Lischina and Councillor Longo, and otherwise we are here, and we're eager to hear the concerns and issues that the public have in response to the various open houses and other information that staff and others have been circulating about the proposed amendments to the parts of the official plan that deal with Midtown. I just want to say that this is a traditional meeting that we do in advance of a decision date. Staff have the advantage of hearing people's questions and concerns, and the object of the meeting is to create a list of the issues and concerns and questions that people have. And at the end of the meeting, whenever it occurs, perhaps tomorrow night, staff will rise and rhyme off all the issues that they've collected. And council will pass a recommendation that the staff go away and consider those and make what changes they think are appropriate to their recommendation on Midtown. In other words, this is a meeting where we collect ideas and concerns from the public to assist staff to refine their proposals. And as it's presently organized, we expect staff to be back the end of June with their refined proposal. And I have no doubt from the rich variety of opinions that I've heard that there'll be a lot for them to work with. At this point, I need to ask council if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest. It's a required formality. I'm not expecting any declarations. And now I need a mover and seconder to resolve into committee of the whole. Councillor Knoll and Councillor Chisholm. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there being none, that carries, and we are in committee of the whole. Tonight's agenda just really contains this one item, the public meeting report it's called, for the town-initiated official plan amendment for the Midtown Oakville Urban Growth Center. And we have opening remarks from Neil Garby, the Commissioner of Community Development, and then a presentation by Jeff Abma, the Senior Planner. And then we have 16 registered delegations, and we will be polling the audience if others wish to add their, if your issue hasn't been covered by the 16 before you, you get to stand up and add it. And if anyone is watching the live stream of this meeting on oakville.ca and wish to speak to the item, they can call 905-815-6095, and we'll connect you to the meeting, and you'll be called upon following the registered delegations. So with that, if we could give our attention to Neil Garby, he will set the stage for this evening's proceedings. Mr. Garby, Commissioner Garby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council and the community. I wanted to provide some shape and context for this meeting tonight. As Mayor Burton has stated, nothing is being decided tonight. We held an open house on May 9th to provide an opportunity for the community to become more familiar with the Midtown Plan and to address in a one-on-one forum some of their questions that they have as staff. No new information is here tonight, but this is an opportunity for council and staff to hear from the public. Nothing is being decided tonight. You will be provided with an overview of the latest iteration of the Midtown policies, and we'll hear from interested parties about issues that staff will investigate to give more shape to the policy document. The reality is that the discussion before council is broader than how tall buildings will be, where people will go to school, or even how many people will live and work in Midtown. The key question facing council and the community is what role will Midtown play in managing the population and employment growth for the next 30 years? The decision around that question will shape the entire municipality. Oakville is forecasted to grow to 374,000 people and 174,000 jobs by 2051. They need to fit in somewhere, and livable Oakville provides the guidance that directs the majority of the growth to the town's urban growth centers and connecting corridors. Midtown is one of those places where growth will occur. It's a symbiotic relationship among the UGCs, the urban growth centers. What happens in one impacts the others. And for many reasons that Jeff will highlight tonight, staff believe that Midtown can accommodate a significant amount of the growth, not the least of which is the presence of mass transit. You will hear tonight that staff have refined Midtown forecasts, and Midtown could accommodate 43,000 people and jobs by 2051, depending on market and available infrastructure. And the balance must fit into the approved urban structure if we are to continue to be guided by our goal of preserving the character of existing neighborhoods and heritage assets and protecting the town's green spaces. This is not the beginning of the Midtown journey. It started many years ago. Similarly, the journey will not end tonight in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, or in reality, 60 years. Midtown has and will evolve just like Oakville has evolved. I will pass the floor to our senior planner, Jeff Abma, for the balance of the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Garby, and good evening, Council and members of the public. It's good to see you all again, and we'll get the presentation up and running here in just a second. So as Commissioner Garby mentioned, no decisions being made tonight, and we are here to present the latest version of the Midtown Official Plan Amendment and then to receive feedback from both Council and the public on what we've proposed. So, starting at a high level, Ontario has a multi-tiered land use planning system, and you'll see with the province of Ontario at the top, and documents like the Planning Act, the Provincial Policy Statement, the Growth Plan, and the Greenbelt Plan are all products of the province. Then we have the region of Halton, and they have a regional official plan, and then at the bottom is us, the town of Oakville, with our official plan and zoning bylaw as the primary tools to guide planning and growth. So up at the provincial level, there's a lot of talk these days that Ontario needs to prepare for growth. We're in a housing crisis, and the current focus is on getting homes built. And so lots of the planning documents that you see listed at the top there are changing as a result. And then the layers beneath that, both the region and the town at the bottom, need to conform upwards. And so a lot of what we're doing now in planning, including this Midtown Official Plan Amendment, is pivoting and responding to what's going on up at the top level. So as Commissioner Garby already mentioned, we've been working on Midtown for a number of years already. The vision for Midtown was first established in our official plan at that time, back in 1999. And since then, this vision has been reinforced by Council and the province a number of times. In 2006, the province designated Midtown as an urban growth center. In 2009, Council adopted our current Livable Oakville plan, which carried forward that vision for Midtown. And in 2017, Council unanimously endorsed the town's urban structure, of which Midtown is a key place and plays a key role. Further, in the last few years, this Midtown OPA has been to Council a number of times, including a number of public statutory meetings like this one, as well as some Council workshops to help explain all the nuances and intricacies of Midtown. And today, here we are again with a third public statutory meeting to present the latest version and then receive feedback and input on it. And I will emphasize, through all this work, the vision for Midtown and for what Midtown is to be has not changed during that time. So our urban structure is another important piece, and it's really the heart of how we grow. It's an enduring piece of policy. It's really helped us recently as we've responded to a lot of provincial policy changes, and it'll continue to help us with the new changes that are coming as well. Our urban structure, which is embedded into our official plan, is really the heart of how we grow. It's our growth management strategy. It's about protecting what we love about Oakville. It's about maintaining the character of our existing neighborhoods, and it's about directing growth to a network of nodes and corridors supported by frequent transit. So there are 7 growth areas, as well as a number of major corridors along Trafalgar Road and Dundas. I wanted to show this image. This was a heat map that was created a little earlier this year to show where the concentrations of the residential units that the town is currently reviewing through applications, where they're located. And I think this helps to show that our urban structure is working. So all these, most of the applications are predominantly located in our designated greenfield area, or essentially north of Dundas, where we expected to grow, as well as in our nodes and along those corridors of Dundas and Trafalgar. A lot of them for sure along the corridor of Trafalgar, all the way up from Midtown, all the way up to the northern boundary of Oakville. But you can also see that it's also spread around. We've got applications in the hospital district, in Palermo Village, in Bronte Village, in Kerr Village, and other places as well. So Midtown is a key node, growth node in our urban structure for a reason. There has already been a lot of significant investment in infrastructure around Midtown by all levels of government. We have priority transit corridors, and this is where new investment will take place in terms of high-frequency transit. Metrolinx is working on the Dundas Bus Rapid Transit Network, which will run along Dundas, as well as incorporating bus rapid transit in the future along Trafalgar Road, connecting down to the Oakville GO station. We also have major transportation corridors, like our 400 series highways, the QEW and the 403, shown here, and this represents significant investment of the province in transportation. And we've got the Lakeshore West GO line, which is slated to provide all-day, two-way service with 15-minute frequency. So again, another important investment in our transportation infrastructure, and where the confluence of a lot of those come together is in Midtown. And so this makes it a logical location to direct future growth to this location. And as I mentioned before, Midtown continues and always has been envisioned as a transit-oriented, complete community. So this is a place where people can live, work, and play, a place they can accomplish most of what they do every day within a short walk, bike ride, or transit ride of their home, all within a well-designed and attractive public realm or streetscape and environment. And importantly, it will be connected to the rest of Oakville as well, and the rest of the GTA, so that when there are times that you need to travel beyond Midtown, you can do so efficiently, and you have lots of options on how to do that, whether that's walking, biking, transit, private car, taxi, car share, scooters, you name it, and so on. The point is that there will be lots of choice in how to move around, not only Midtown, but Oakville in the future. So this Midtown OPA is required to meet some of the legislative changes that are happening up at the provincial level. And it's our job to make sure it complies with the applicable legislation of the day. And so that's a big part of what we're doing through this official plan amendment. Quite simply, the official plan amendment sets the parameters for these four things: what land uses are allowed, the density at which those land uses come, the transportation network, and the public realm, which includes the parks and streetscapes. And this becomes the framework for future council decisions on development applications, as well as it sets the stage for detailed implementation work which is yet to come. And that includes getting all the infrastructure, both above ground and below ground, in place to support Midtown. So now I'll start to dive into these four subjects. So with respect to land use, we're proposing to extend mixed-use land permissions across Midtown. And this is not new. This is something that we've been showing the last number of times we've been here at council. And essentially that comes down to the fact that the nature of work and office employment is changing. Companies are looking to locate in mixed-use areas where people can live and work, and they're supported by transit and other ways of getting around, as opposed to the traditional, say, office park or standalone office building. And while office-only buildings are still permitted, these policies now allow a mixing of residential uses with them across the entire length of Midtown, except for the one corner, but that's simply because of its proximity to the rail yards to the east. Otherwise, we would likely be looking at extending residential uses there as well. So as I mentioned before, Midtown will be connected in terms of transportation. It will create needed connections and help finish some missing ones. So this map, for example, shows the existing sidewalk, the trails, and the cycling routes in Oakville. So essentially the active transportation network. And it's pretty quickly you can start to see that there's limited connections to get from the south to the north across the QEW. Midtown Oakville provides a great opportunity through its development to allow more of those connections and improve the ones that we currently have. So zooming into Midtown a little bit more, what you'll see here is in the brown circles and arrows, those are existing active transportation connections. And then there are new future connections that are shown in the purple or magenta color. And so you'll see that currently there are basically 2 ways to get across in Midtown, but as Midtown develops, we intend to have about 5 of them. And I think it's important to maybe pause right here and describe that there are transportation infrastructure components that are needed to make Midtown successful that are actually outside of Midtown. So you'll see the boundary here, but it's important to point out, and I'll see if I can, if my mouse will work. Oops, let's move back. So Royal Windsor interchange. I think this is potentially sometimes forgotten, but the plans intend to build essentially a full interchange at Royal Windsor to basically help out with the ways to get in and out of Midtown, whereas right now we only have the Trafalgar Road interchange. The plans also are proposing a north-south road in between Trafalgar and Royal Windsor that would then also take some of the pressure off Trafalgar and be able to funnel transit and other traffic, active transportation, and cars down into Midtown and get them off Trafalgar Road so that there's more than one way to move into and through Midtown. Some of the active transportation networks, so on Royal Windsor Interchange, that will also include some active transportation options. The north-south road will have facility for active transportation, and then you may know of the pillar that's currently sitting in the middle of the QEW. Well, that is another important active transportation connection that will connect Midtown to the Oakville Place and provide another connection across. And in fact, the design is currently in the works for that one. Moving on, the tracks also present a barrier. So through the Midtown plan, we have more opportunities to improve these connections as well. I'll point out at this point on Chartwell, there's a grade separation that's being proposed. What you'll also see is that you may say, hey, are there 2 grade separations going in? And the answer is no, the intent is for only 1. So the ideal or the favorite spot or the preferred spot for one would be along Chartwell, but as part of, we're not quite sure if the grades will work. So part of the study that will look at whether this will work is we'll also explore the other option that you see in around the magenta circle there. And if the grade separation is indeed better located there, that will include the active transportation connection. But if it goes to Chartwell, we still intend to have an active transportation crossing in the location showed by the magenta. Hopefully that helps explain a little bit, but I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on that point. And then lastly, there would definitely be more ways to connect and cross the QEW, as I mentioned before, with the 2 full interchanges and a north-south crossing. So those are all reflected within our transportation network, even though they're not highlighted as well as you might think. They are shown on this transportation schedule outside of Midtown, and within Midtown, we're looking at some other changes that you may notice have been different since the last time we were here. The main change being that we're now proposing to realign Cross Avenue. Instead of doing what you can see under the existing, where it's a swoop up to Davis Road, we're now intending to maintain that all the way across in a southern location. And the purpose for this is we want it to be a unifying feature for Midtown. It's intended to be Midtown's main street and tie both sides of Trafalgar Road together in Midtown. And some of the rest of the network changes have been made to adjust to that relocation. And one of the benefits I'll point out is that perhaps Davis Road can remain in its existing alignment with this network. We've also simplified the right-of-way widths, so there's only 3 types for an arterial, collector, and local road. And some may have noticed that some of these right-of-way widths might be a little bit wider than we're typically used to. in Oakville, and part of that is because we want to ensure that we've got space for a lot of different things, but including active transportation facilities such as bike lanes and separated bike paths potentially, as well as all the underground infrastructure that may need to go in there, including the ability, say, for potential district energy at some point. We got to make sure we have room for all these things. So what you're seeing is a lot of a dark gray underlay, and that's because we acknowledge that this revised network will have to be confirmed through the appropriate study coming up. So now the vision for this, for Cross Avenue is an important part of the public realm plan as well, which relates to the public realm plan that we're proposing. So I'm going to focus in on this portion of Cross right now to try and describe some of those for you. So this public realm, the public realm that we're proposing for Midtown is actually based on the hierarchy from the 2031 Parks Plan. And so when we talk about the public realm, really we're meaning the spaces in between the buildings. So that's everything from streets to parks to squares to any space in between in buildings where the public has full access and ability to go. So while the terminology we have used to describe the public realm may appear odd, with terms like public common, promenade, urban square, and connector, this was intentional, as these are the terms that are used within the town's 2031 park plan, and we wanted to make sure we were aligning with that plan. So here's the public realm schedule that's part of the official plan amendment. Some of the things that we've adjusted since last time is we've extended the promenade that we were showing on the west side, on the west side of Trafalgar, all the way across now for all of Cross Avenue. And we've adjusted the widths since last time as well. But the principle is still the same. It's a linear streetscape with room to walk, room for outdoor cafes, for patios, for fun outdoor features, places to sit, and so on. And on the east side of Cross, the promenade and streetscape can take advantage of the open space that will be provided by the hydro corridor, which will remain as open space, even if we have limited ability to put a lot of park structures in it. So the parks plan describes promenades as linear spaces, typically located on one side of the street that enhance the pedestrian experience and have highly activated at-grade retail spaces. And you can see some of staff's visualization efforts to demonstrate what that could look like along Cross. Urban squares. Urban squares support neighborhood-oriented social opportunities. So it can include places to sit, to eat, just hang out, and it's intended to serve those that are within a 5-minute walking distance of it. So we've provided a number of locations for a scattering of these across Midtown so that there are opportunities for this type of gathering. Public commons are larger social and recreational focal points for a neighborhood, and will have a combination of both active and passive uses. And this helps meet the needs of the local community and may be linked with future town community facilities, and as we'll talk about a little bit later, potentially even schools. Last, but certainly not least, we have connectors, which are primarily intended to provide quick and easy pedestrian or other active transportation movement between important locations, but essentially will act as space for the public to walk through, to hang out in and enjoy. Some of the ones we're proposing are to access the GO station, as well as where the landing for the active transportation crossing coming from Oakville Place will land as well. And then moving back out, it's important to remember that Midtown is not an island. It's part of Oakville and will connect with the larger Parks and Open Space Network for Oakville, which is built upon this idea of a campus of parks and community facilities. So these will all play a part in supporting Midtown, the same way that Midtown will support that larger network as well. And each of these pieces are intended to serve and be readily available for anyone in Oakville, not just the people who may live next door. So now moving on to density. I think it's important to point out that one of the primary changes at the provincial level is that Section 34 of the Planning Act was changed to remove the bonusing tool from the Act. So bonusing offered extra height and density in exchange for community benefits. Essentially, it was a way for landowners to gain extra height and density by providing desired community benefits. And quite frankly, there was not necessarily a real limit as to what could be proposed. On a case-by-case basis, landowners could negotiate with council in terms of what height and density could be achieved in exchange for the community benefits that would be provided as part of that development. And the current, in effect, Midtown policies are based on this tool. One of the big tasks for this Midtown Official Plan Amendment is to replace that bonusing framework. Oh, and I will point out that the areas eligible for bonusing in the current in effect policies are essentially everything north of the tracks. It's all hatched out and is lands eligible for bonusing. So I also want to point out that in 2017, a Midtown Area Servicing Plan was created based on the policies that are currently in effect. And it estimated, well, in 2031, we would reach 23,000 people in jobs. It also estimated a build out of approximately 68,000 people in jobs by 2051, and it did say, or 2061. I've put it on this chart as 2061. And so this estimate was produced, like I said, under that existing bonusing framework as a way to anticipate the development that might be coming. And so this essentially is our starting point for looking for something to replace those bonusing policies. So the proposed density ranges in the Midtown Official Plan Amendment will replace this bonusing framework. As we proposed last time, we're still proposing to use floor space index to govern the overall amount of development in Midtown and no longer trying to use building heights to do this. The majority of development is intended to happen north of the railway tracks, similar to where the lands eligible for bonusing are currently shown in the in effect policies, and that's where the highest densities will be. We're looking at a minimum of 4 FSI and a maximum of 10 in this location, with lower minimums and maximums south of the tracks. So floor space index controls how much development can happen on a site. And let me see if I can help explain a little bit how this works. So floor space index is simply X number of times the lot area. So if you have an FSI of 10, the maximum floor space that you could build on a site is 10 times the lot area. So if you have a lot area of 7,600 square meters, the total permitted floor area that could be built would be 76,000 square meters. So here's an example of where you build that, where you go lot line to lot line. And this is an FSI of 10, and the stories is 10. But now let's apply some setbacks. Move it back from the property line. Let's apply a building depth that makes sense for, say, a double-loaded corridor building, and you could get something like this that has more open space on the lot. It's an FSI of 10, and the stories are now 21 stories. But we look at it and we're like, hey, we could fit 2 buildings on here. So let's split that floor area into 2 buildings and still have some space at the ground for open space and the setbacks. And we now have the same FSI of 10, but we have a building height of 14 stories. We have policies in the town that essentially say that above the 6th floor, we should limit the floor plate of buildings to 750 square meters so that we are protecting the ability for sunlight to come down and hit the street and hit the public realm and not prevent overshadowing that those taller buildings might have provided. And the towers are intended to be 30 meters apart so that when the shadows from these towers move across the landscape, it's a narrower profile that moves across and there are gaps where sunlight can continue to come through. Again, now when you do that, we're set an FSI of 10, the stories go up to 60 stories. And as that, if you play with that floor plate, if it gets bigger, the building heights can come down, but your potential for shadowing down at the street level becomes greater. And then lastly, if we say we don't want towers at the same height so we don't get a crop top look to Midtown, and we start varying the height, we still have an FSI of 10. One building has gone to 64 and the other one has dropped to 56. But the important part to look at this is just in terms of the floor space index controls how much development, but it's the design direction that shapes the resulting built form. So all of the images that you see here show an FSI of 10, but all have their pros and cons in terms of their building design. And the direction that Livable Oakville goes and is headed, as well as the Midtown policies, is for the podium and then the restricted floor plate above the 6th story. So I've also heard the comment that I have never heard of FSI being used before. Like, is it used elsewhere? And the answer is yes. FSI is used within the GTA as well as the other areas, and I'll just put up a few examples. Here's the Markham Center secondary plan update that uses FSI to control density, and it shows FSIs of 9 to 10 in Markham. In Vaughan Metropolitan Center, in the secondary plan, in 2021, there was a plan that was adopted that had a maximum of up to an FSI of 6. So now here we are in 2023, and they're already experiencing development pressure and demands for double that amount, and are actually in the process of updating their secondary plan in response to that. And some of the maximums that they are now looking at are in the realm of 11 to 12 FSI. And while this may not be technically in the GTA, it's certainly in the area. This is up in Innisfil, where they have the Orbit secondary plan around the Innisfil GO station. And they too use FSIs, and they have a maximum of 9 right around their GO station as well. So now moving back here to Midtown, I'll try to walk through you a little bit of how we can use these FSIs to estimate potential yields and how that will helps inform the density ranges that we've proposed. So the Midtown boundary was set by the region through Regional Official Plan Amendment 48, and the overall area of that boundary is 103 hectares. Looking at ownership, just over half of Midtown is privately owned, and the rest is publicly owned through a combination of the town, the province, Halton Region. I believe CN owns a small narrow strip in here, as well as Metrolinx. But you can see it's essentially half and half in terms of public and private. So then when you take the road network that's shown in the Midtown OPA and apply the right-of-way widths that are proposed, this basically starts to define the development blocks in Midtown. And these are the resulting development blocks. The area of these blocks is just over 47 hectares. And I'll just touch on the roads in a minute. So from that, we can estimate the people and jobs that we could potentially expect. I will point out here that these net development blocks actually include the park spaces that we're showing on our land use schedules. And it's because parks are important. And this allows landowners and developers to take advantage of the density for any land they provide for public parks within the overall development. And it's essentially baked in to this number that I will show how we got to. So you take the net development blocks, and you multiply it by whatever the maximum FSI in that area that you're looking at, whether that's 4, 6, or 10. And then there is a load of assumptions that you need to make and derive, including, how efficient are you planning out your floor spaces for your units. There's elevators, there's waste chutes, mechanical rooms. You need to make some assumptions about, well, what's the mix of the number of bedrooms per unit? Are they 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom? What are the average unit sizes for each of those? How many people per unit for each type are those generating? And then you need to look at, okay, there's some non-residential space that are included in these buildings, whether that's amenity space, whether that's, it's a place for employment jobs, or we're wanting to incorporate office space into some of these mixed-use developments. And when you have people, you generate what's termed population-related jobs. So these are jobs in commercial or retail, for example. A lot of the assumptions that we used in our calculations came from development charge background studies, from work that the region was doing on the integrated growth management strategy, as well as some census data in terms of PPU and things like that. And then you crunch all those together, and I'll spare you all the details of that. You get an estimate and this is assuming that all of those development blocks that I showed you develop to the maximum. So this is really a theoretical build out, and that comes to about 68,000 or 69,000 people in jobs. So how does that relate to the graph I showed earlier about the existing policies that were anticipated to potentially get us to 68,000 by the year 2061? Some of the work that we've been working with Halton Region in terms of the draft joint best planning estimates are showing that that we could reach 33,000 by the year 2041. 18,000 by the year 2031. 33,000 by the year 2041, and then potentially 43,000 by 2051, as Commissioner Garvey mentioned earlier. And then if you extend that growth rate out, you could get to that build-out number of 68,000 sometime by maybe around 2081. And what's interesting to show is that if you look at the 2016 and 2021 numbers, the original estimate was that we'd be at 9,000 people in jobs by 2016 in the area servicing plan. The census has told us we're at 5,000 people in jobs in Midtown by 2021. So you can see we haven't even quite achieved that one. And so achieving these numbers, even though the build-out was slated for 2061 previously, is likely going to be longer if you extrapolate out to where that theoretical build-out could happen. So essentially, the estimate at 10 FSI for just the net development blocks, not incorporating some of the other policies I get into in a minute, would get us what seems to be a like-for-like replacement of the bonusing policies with these new density ranges, but with an extended timeline for achieving it. I think the point to take here is that it's going to take a long time before all the properties in Midtown redevelop, and quite frankly, I'm not sure if they all ever will. So now, moving on, we've heard from the community over the last number of years that there are a lot of pieces that we would like to see in Midtown in order to make it the place that we envision it to be. So we're introducing policies to help us get the pieces that we need to create this complete community that we've envisioned. So those are things like really good parks and open spaces, active transportation facilities, both to allow movement within Midtown as well as through and connect to the rest of Oakville. We've heard that we want units sized for families. We don't just want those one-bedroom and studio apartments that tend to be common in a lot of high-rise development. We want a range of affordability. We want affordable units. We want it to be affordable to move into some of these units. And we also want a mixing of uses within buildings, because this helps to create that live, work, play environment that we're looking for. So we've heard that urban grocery stores are important. Offices, schools are important, community facilities, and other non-residential space. And for the network that we're proposing to support Midtown, we need land for those roads, particularly local roads. So what we've tried to do is use the official plan amendment to introduce a number of alternative tools to try and get these pieces that we need. Previously, we could try and use bonusing to get those, right? On a case-by-case negotiation to get those community benefits if they weren't provided in an application. Now we're looking to potentially trade some heightened density to get those using these policy tools. So let's just start with roads for a second, bring back this map. And so what you'll see primarily in brown, where the roads are located, are roads that are currently under private ownership. And there are a number of ways to get roads, but quite frankly, we can't afford to buy them all. So some of these may need to be expropriated, but the province is also limiting our ability to collect funds for this type of purpose, similar to the way they are in terms of acquiring land for parks. Some of these roads, if they're arterials or collectors, could potentially be conveyed to the town through a plan of subdivision, if that's forms part of an application. But for the remainder of the roads, some of these tools may not be available, nor the funds available to purchase them. So we're looking for other tools to essentially incent the provision of these to the town as part of development. So now, I just want to talk a little bit about setting an FSI density range, and it's really about trying to find balance. So it's about finding balance between economic development, which, quite frankly, we need to have happen in order to get Midtown to develop, and balancing that against the community benefits that we've been talking about, to those elements that we need to create a complete community. So building up makes the math work from an economic standpoint, which then enables a lot of the other things we've been talking about. Ultimately, the economics must make sense to realize these elements and to support current and future planned servicing and infrastructure investments. If the FSI is not set right, maybe it's too low, there may not be the ability to provide larger size units because they are not as quite in demand as, say, the smaller ones are. There may be less of an opportunity to make it work for affordable units. There may be less space available that's available for some of the things like schools and some of the office spaces that we're looking for, as well as the parks and open spaces. So I stress that it's a matter of trying to find the right balance of setting an FSI that gets us both what we want, but still enables development to happen. So it's important to acknowledge that yes, depending on the extent to which these incentive policies are taken advantage of, these policies will mean an increase over and above that base build-out number of 68,000 people in jobs. I do want to point out, though, that these policies will not necessarily increase how fast growth will come to Midtown. And that growth may continue on, as all cities do, as they all continue to grow and evolve over time, may come later on. We will go past that 68,000 base. But what these policies do allow is that those pieces that we need for complete community can come when the growth comes now, so that they incent the pieces that we want and that we need to make Midtown a complete community. So as I said, trying to find that right balance of economic development and community benefit is important. So we're here tonight to listen to what everybody thinks about the balance that we've put forward in this OPA. And other important factors to keep in mind is monitoring policies that we've put in. The town will be monitoring the progression of Midtown, and this monitoring can be used as part of and will be used, I will say, as part of our regular review of our official plan, which we do every 5 to 10 years. And we have the opportunity to see how things are going and course correct if needed to get more of the things we want and less of the things we don't want. Continuing on the theme of things we do want, schools. We want schools in Midtown. And so this OPA has introduced policies and vision for schools in mixed-use buildings to be incorporated into development that's coming. We've been meeting regularly with the school boards to look at how schools can be provided for students living in Midtown. The vision is for schools in mixed-use buildings, in podiums adjacent to open spaces that can then potentially be shared between schools and parks, similar to what is being contemplated in other transit-supportive complete communities in the GTA, such as the ones you see on the screen here. One of the big concerns that we've heard from the school boards is timing, as building schools and obtaining funding to build these schools, especially this new style of school, which hasn't necessarily been done in Halton to this point, will take time. And understanding what developments might be going ahead at what time is very important. So involving the school boards as soon as possible in these developments is vital. And the policies are intended to facilitate that conversation early on, to ensure that landowners and the school boards have had discussions about, will they partner, is the timing right, and ideally before applications even make it to the town. so that when these proposals are submitted to the town, and if a school is to be included, it is already part of that initial proposal. And that hopefully will facilitate getting these schools into Midtown. So there are many things that need to happen after the OPA. And here's a list of a lot of them. And a lot of them deal with the details that we've heard are so very important in Midtown. So it includes things like new designing Midtown plan, a public realm master plan, urban design direction for Midtown, a municipal land acquisition and disposal strategy, how to figure out how to do schools and mixed-use buildings, community energy plan and incorporating community energy into Midtown, as well as a lot of the transportation and engineering study to look at the servicing, to get the roads, to get the pipes, everything that we need to make Midtown work, as well as a number of others, including the monitoring program, phasing plan, and how to fund a lot of these things. And so the point I really want to make here is this OPA is not the end to the process. It's really just the beginning, because there are so many things that need to happen to figure out how to get Midtown developed. And within all of this work that you see here, there are many, many, many more opportunities for the public to chime in into that process, to talk about all the details that we've been hearing are so important for Midtown. And this is not necessarily a task the town can do on its own, and council has already endorsed the engagement of a group of consultants to help us get this work done. The consultant team has recently been retained and is now ready to begin work in cooperation with all of our other partners in order to implement Midtown. And there's all these different facets that are being that will be looked at by this team of consultants along with us. I've come to the end of my presentation, and I just want to reiterate that a decision is not being made. The recommendation in the staff report is simply that that staff's report regarding the Midtown Oakville Urban Growth Center, as well as comments from council and the public with respect to this draft initiated official plan amendment, are received. Thank you very much. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abno. For those of you who do, as much as I'd love to hear staff applauded, because they so seldom do, we have a rule against applauding, so I have to beg you not to do that. So for those of you who do not have seats, I have a bit of good news. We have set up, and they're now operating, some rooms downstairs near the front of the building on this side. There are so-called committee rooms, the Trafalgar room and the Oakville room, and indeed all of the committee rooms down there. So you have audio and video, and if you would like to sit and watch instead of stand and watch, you're welcome to do that. And I hope that that's satisfactory. And if you prefer to stand, you're welcome to stay. Now, Council, I propose to have the clerk call the delegations. Madam Clerk, would you call the registered delegations, and then we'll poll the audience. And before you do, let me repeat that if you're watching this meeting live on oakville.ca and you wish to also speak to this, you can call 905-815-6095, and we'll connect you to the meeting and call on you to speak following the registered delegations and those who volunteer from the audience. Madam Clerk.
So the first registered delegation is Rick Snidel and Ted Huggan. And the delegation after that is Gordon Brennan, if he is in one of the rooms downstairs, if he can make his way up to the council chamber.
Well, good evening, Your Worship, members of council. As you know, We Love Oakville is a consortium of associations in Oakville. Individual RAs will be delegating with their specific concerns. So to save some time and duplication, our discussions are going to be fairly high level and cover key issues that we're concerned about. Now, as everybody knows, the current housing environment in Ontario is driven by high prices, low inventory, and projections of high numbers of new immigrants needing places to live. The provincial government has passed several bills designed to speed up construction and reduce time and cost for developers to produce units to meet a target of 1.5 million new homes over the next 10 years. These create significant financial and social risks to communities while reducing zoning restrictions on developers. 29 Ontario municipalities have signed housing pledges to the province, which essentially means we are competing for new housing starts. As Midtown will be the largest project in Oakville's history, now is the time we need to work together to get it right. That means at least consistent quality with past town planning and high level of resident satisfaction with our Oakville neighborhoods. This OPA is a guiding document for town planners and, to a large extent, an aspirational document for us to meet our ambitious housing pledge. It does not set out any rules for developers. Oakville has pledged 33,000 new homes over the next 10 years. As such, we're competing with other growth centers in the GTHA for new residents. We think Midtown can be a unique neighborhood reflecting Oakville's spirit and lifestyle rather than just another high-rise destination. We need this OPA to show how we can be different and better than the competition. We believe that our new neighborhood should be developed based on livability, a sense of community and quality rather than the price per square foot.
Good evening, everyone. The top 4 concerns we would like to get right up front for this OPA is to make sure the document firmly reflects, number 1, there be a balanced mix of singles, families, and seniors, and able to create a livable community and not huge towers built with small units for first-time buyers. Secondly, Midtown amenities must include adequate green spaces that are interesting, useful, and accessible to all residents and visitors to Oakville, part of livable Oakville. Number 3, there must be a focus to provide local employment for residents of Oakville and Midtown. And number 4, there must be financial fairness for both current and future taxpayers in Oakville. Back to Ted.
We decided to tag team here, so co-authors as well. We do share a number of concerns with residents. Oakville will incur significant costs to provide services for Midtown. With reduced development charge recoveries, this creates a real financial risk to existing residents. Oakville has signed a significant housing pledge. Are we confident in our population estimates, which seem to be moving targets, which will be used to guide the development services and infrastructure? There will be considerable pressure on the Cornwall-Trafalgar roads, neither of which can be widened. Have mitigation factors been sufficiently planned? There will be considerable pressure on police and fire services, transit, childcare spaces, and social services. Parkland and green space is extremely limited within the development. Are facilities north and south of the QEW able to handle these increases in population? Will they be accessible? School transportation capacity is already stretched to the limit. Can we find classrooms for our new children? The rendition of Midtown at the presentation and the town hall were quite bluntly eye candy. I don't know how to say it nicely. They show townhouses, wide open green space, and lots of blue sky. We don't think that's clearly realistic based on other developments. What will it really look like? We've referred to reduced development costs incurred by the town of Oakville. However, permanent projects have no deadline or deliverables on behalf of the developer. Are there contingency plans if targets are not realized? So far, we only see applications for high-density residential towers with lower blocks allocated for commercial purposes. do we anticipate significant employment and more jobs available in Midtown? What can the OPA do to encourage this?
Note for future presenters, that clock runs down really quickly, but to wrap up, we want Midtown to be a vibrant new community to be enjoyed by both new and current Oakville residents and visitors. We want to invite young people, families, and seniors to live in the community. We need Midtown to be a financial success for both developers and citizens. Since this plan covers more than 30 years of development, we need vision, planning, and consensus now to ensure it succeeds as all we hope it will. Now is the time to ensure all of the parties engaged in Midtown, we're talking the town, the developers, and Queen's Park, to communicate and work together for this project. We think the OPA as presented is a missed opportunity for us to clearly communicate our vision of what we want Midtown to be and lay down guidelines to make this a reality. But we understand this OPA is a first step in the process. We know that the town has limited enforcement powers over developers. We also know that the provincial government legislation recently enacted many policies that favor developers over local municipalities. We also know that the great majority of OLT, land tribunal decisions, support developers over local governments. And we are concerned deeply that a single ministerial zoning order, MZO, could instantly override our current plans. However, we believe we must work actively to promote our vision for Midtown beyond aspirational hopes and pretty pictures that currently make up a lot of the OPA. We need a more specific plan. We need to set out our standards of what do we expect it to be. And if we don't articulate our vision and objectives now, we fear that Midtown could end up as just another collection of tall towers in a concrete jungle. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Gordon Brennan, board member of the Oakville Community Association, and following Gordon will be Santiago Lavino.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
First, I wanted to say, good to see Sean healthy. Good evening, Council and Mayor Burton. Thank you for approving our delegation. My name is Gordon Brennan. I am an active board of directors member of the Oakville Community Association, also known as OCA. I'm here tonight as a delegate concerning the future Midtown development. Before our PowerPoint presentation, I wish to point out that we have received close to 1,000 comments through social media, and only one was in favor of this development in its current form. As an association that encompasses all of Oakville, we are not against new home developments. However, the planning of our beloved city that still calls itself a town is very important not only to our board, but to all residents, business owners, tourists, and future homeowners, especially new immigrants. This Midtown monstrosity is the epitome of what I classify as anti-Oakville. For over 100 years, Oakville enjoyed having its own unique character, affluent from its core beginnings with traditions of kindness and philanthropy, with real estate that flowed through the simple cottage-like homes to its stately manners. This eventuality expanded with townhouses, semi-detached, and small single-detached homes. Apartments and condominium buildings sprouted up over the years with limited heights in districts spread out across our town. Now we have this one-time massive proposal of high density never seen before in Oakville's history. Frustration amongst thousands has and is growing because once more residents feel unheard of and even betrayed of the system that states one thing but does another. Because of these extended frustrations, citizens of Oakville want to know what, if any, are the consequences of council and even the province from ignoring or potentially ignoring residents' needs and concerns. So we can go to the PowerPoint. So, you want to go to the first slide, please? Thanks. So the Oakville Community Association wants to contribute to creating an engaging, safe, caring, and vibrant community where all residents enjoy a positive quality of life. Next slide, please. And of course, the Midtown proposal is against our vision as a residents association. Next slide, please. So a lot of this is going to be talked about, the density. The Midtown basically is proposing more than what Manhattan has right now as far as people per hectare. 200 is the minimum target proposal for 2031, up to 400 by 2051. And, which another delegate will be talking about tonight, up to 1165 people per hectare based on current proposals extrapolated over the 103 hectares. Basically, we're saying it's a concentration of new home buyers in a defined space as being labeled outside of here as a 15-minute city. My question is always, will the new home buyers embrace this type of development over the incumbent years with this high density capacity? The talk about extreme anti-urban sprawl, and this is sort of like the opposite to it as far as what we're concerned. Next slide, please. Transportation and infrastructure. The transportation report dated June 14th, and I don't know if council will be asking the builder developers for a new transportation study. Sometimes they do ask for builders to do that. Mark's final report clearly sets out in section 8 of pages 11 and 12 the road design proposed for Midtown. There's no mention of the immense cost of the infrastructure and how it would be financed in conjunction with the province. A failure to complete the majority of infrastructure improvements at an early stage would cause serious traffic congestion in the short and medium term. And I know that Mayor Burton has talked about the infrastructure being done first, which is good to hear, hopefully. In the U.S., I wanted to point out that a lot of roads, sewers, cable, electric, all the infrastructure usually has to be physically installed before a subdivision can even be sold. Next slide, please. So I know that the planning director, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, Alba, I believe, he talked about the shadows. Our review basically stated that as of April 25th, one of the towers proposed at or near the corner of Cross Avenue and Argus Road depicts a significant impact on the surrounding areas as reflected in these examples. Next slide, please. Okay, the floodplain spill zone in 2020, Conservation Halton completed the mapping of the spill from the Morrison-Wedgwood diversion channel and confirmed the diversion channel will now spill in the event of a major storm, and the spill zone has only been mapped to the QEW as per the Conservation Halton inserted below. The spill mapping should be completed to determine the risk of flooding in the event of a large storm within the Midtown proposed development area, which could be consistent with Section 2.5 of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry 2002 Technical Guide, River and Stream Systems. So Section 2.5 confirms that municipalities and planning boards should show or describe floodplain lands in their official plans and incorporate policies to address new development consistent within the policy statement. And I must point out that 4.6 also states that you can't use stormwater management detention ponds within your flow rates. Next slide, please. You can see the blue arrows showing where the floodplains are going to be affected with this development. Next slide, please. This is pretty simple. It's pretty obvious that when you have more impervious areas, concrete jungle, as some people have already suggested, you're going to have more runoff downstream. Water is going to find an impervious area very easy to flow through and to get to where it wants to go, which is downstream. Water, as you know, has no concept of borders and doesn't care where it goes, just as long as it goes downstream. So obviously, less grass, less fill is going to cause, and more impervious areas is going to cause more downstream flooding. Next slide, please. So the PPS, or Provincial Policy Statement from 2020, section, as you see there, of the PPS includes policies for stormwater management planning, including that it shall mitigate or reduce. It's been, those two words have been mitigated around and reduced around, have been used before. Risk to human health and safety, property, and the environment. The Midtown will increase the risk for residents downstream, especially of this size. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read these out. These are just some of the comments. You can read them on your own from our association members, along with various social media comments that we've been collecting for the past few months, actually. So our summary for, next slide, please, yeah. The residents are not happy, or at least the ones we've spoken to with our association, with the proposal of Midtown as it, in its current proposal. Density could be higher than Manhattan and some cities in China. Beijing, to be honest, is not needed to meet the provincial targets. Increase of impervious surfaces will cause increased risk for residents. Shadows from high-rise buildings will cast shadows over existing neighborhoods, and the diversion channel will spill in a major storm. The official plan should adhere to the flood hazard limiting, and section of the you see there of the PPS should be followed and mitigate risk to human health. Next slide, please. So this is when Ann Mulville was in power, but everybody remembers this, at least people that have been around for as long as I have as well. The flooding that we had in 2000. Mayor Mulville did deal with it in a limited way and fixed a lot of the areas that were flooded in there. But of course, this hazard is definitely part of the problem that could be part of this Midtown development. Next slide, please. And more from year 2000. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a concerning saw wet. I'm running out of time, but basically Councillor Elgar had mentioned that he was not happy with the units in saw wet, and we need to learn from this for this Midtown. Went from 700 units to 1,200 units, plus the condominium that they're building in there. And Mayor Burton had mentioned about the flooding properties south of the 14 Mile Creek with saw wet being developed, which we know is now completely, pretty much constructed and developed. So it's something we need to learn from with this Midtown. Next slide, please. Our association cannot support Midtown because it will not create a safe, caring, and vibrant community where all residents enjoy a positive quality of life for all Oakville residents. The proposal does not fit within the character of Oakville. It will create a situation of potential increased risk to property damage and threat to life due to increased flood risks. And the next slide. Thank you very much. Sorry I had to do it fast because, yeah, it runs out quick.
Thank you for your information, sir. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Santiago Levano, and following that will be Elizabeth Chalmers.
Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Do we have a PowerPoint? There we go. Okay. So Midtown Oakville aims to be a very walkable, high-density, and well-connected community. And a big part of what it's trying to do is reduce car dependency relative to the rest of Oakville. That's why they're doing the high-rises. That's why it's at the GO station. Unfortunately, the presented active and public transportation options are insufficient for a population of 20,000 people, never mind a population of 68,000 people. And as you've already heard, and as you're going to hear, car traffic impacts on the QEW, on Trafalgar, and on Cross are going to be among the primary worries that Oakville residents have about this development. So effectively addressing these and ensuring that the car traffic impacts from this development are minimized and that car dependency is kept low will be critical to the success of this project. Throughout this presentation, I'll be drawing on my education and transit industry experience to highlight this deficiency in transportation options and put forward a few recommendations to improve the connectivity of future Midtown Oakville residents. It's important to note that the transportation options in Midtown Oakville must not only exist, as Oakville Transit presently does, to collect riders without a car, but they must offer enough comfort, connectivity, frequency, and reliability to be a competitive option when compared to a car. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Oakville Go is the only place presently in Midtown Oakville, or really in Oakville as a whole, that meets these criteria of competition. And as was already outlined, the service quality is very good. Next slide, please. Thank you. However, we can't necessarily just build the entire development around Oakville Go, as it's very optimistic to assume that everyone who lives in Midtown or works in Midtown will be located regionally, and additionally, considering the changing nature of work and the constantly growing nature of the GTHA, it's highly likely that the population of Midtown Oakville will have very diverse transportation needs. Fortunately, as was already mentioned, the Dundas Bus Rapid Transit and the under-designed 407 Transitway will connect Oakville to the rest of the GTHA. However, it will fall on the town to connect Midtown residents to the 407 and to Dundas along the Trafalgar Road corridor. Next slide, please. So this corridor along Trafalgar Road is pretty much vital to the success of Midtown Oakville. Not only because through the 407 and through Dundas, it will connect Midtown Oakville residents to the greater GTHA, to their jobs, their friends, their families across it, but also because it will be the key to connecting existing Oakville residents to the amenities and residents and shops in Midtown Oakville, never mind Oakville Go itself, which already has 1.5 million annual riders. So, additionally, a large proportion of the car traffic within Midtown Oakville would be from other Oakville residents who don't have the benefit of living right next to the GO station and who presently drive and park in the large parking spaces and the large parking garages there. If we are unable to provide competitive and comfortable alternatives to these drives, then it doesn't matter how many people you put in Midtown Oakville, it will already be congested just from the people that don't live there. Next slide, please. Yeah, a little controversial. So, to my understanding, what's presently planned for this corridor is a rapid bus line, which would be adequate for what presently exists along the corridor. However, in the scope of planned growth of 68,000 new people, a bus rapid transit system along Trafalgar Road will have some inherent disadvantages when this growth occurs and higher frequencies are required. These disadvantages include higher labor costs when frequencies are scaled, lower capacity, and a greater vulnerability to traffic conditions. Additionally, from a customer perspective and a town of Oakville perspective, a bus rapid transit system is an inherently less comfortable and less attractive proposition when compared to a light rail line. And when the goal is to pull people away from their cars, that is something that is very important to consider. While a light rail line may seem like an improbable proposition for a town such as Oakville, Kitchener-Waterloo has a population only slightly larger than Oakville does, and with these projections of 334,000, the population will be that high. Additionally, Oakville's population is 3 times denser, and the Trafalgar Road corridor is very much so greatest hits of destinations. There's jobs, there will be Midtown Oakville, there's Oakville Place, and of course, there's Sheridan College. So this 10-kilometer corridor is abundant in these connections and in these destinations and could viably host a 17-stop system as seen above. This system would effectively reduce car trips from residents across Oakville while connecting Midtown residents not only to the rest of Oakville, not only to their school, to work, to shopping, but also to the rest of the greater Toronto and Hamilton area. Additionally, this construction of guideways across the Queen Elizabeth Way and the 16-Mile Creek would enable parallel construction of pedestrian and active transportation linkages that are very much so missing. If someone wants to walk from Kerr Village to Midtown Oakville underneath the present plan, they have to go up and then down, which, as someone who's done that walk, can get a little tiring. Now, next slide, please. Now, everyone in this room knows that in some way, shape, or form, this growth in Midtown Oakville is going to happen. And as this corridor continues to grow along Dundas, along the 407, and here in Midtown, it will become increasingly difficult to construct a project at the scale of an LRT. And as someone who has had experience working in these construction projects, it's very critical to build these projects into future-proof while there is the room to do so. And if the corridor if studies are conducted and the corridor lacks the present demand for an LRT system, it would be feasible to follow the example of the Mississauga Transitway, which is presently a bus rapid transit system, but when it was constructed, all of the requisite utility relocations, all of the stations, and all of the bridge restructurings and calculations and heights were built for an LRT. It is feasible right now to build tracks and extend the Eglinton Crosstown LRT into the Mississauga Transitway. Such an option and such future-proofing is something that it is essential to consider right now while the 407 is still a greenfield, while Trafalgar still has its wide boulevard, while Oakville Place and Sheridan College are still surrounded by parking lots, and most importantly, while Midtown Oakville is still defined by possibility instead of complexity. This space will allow for less expensive construction methodology, which will no longer be possible once construction is complete. Whatever surface transit right-of-way is chosen, be it bus lanes or an LRT elevated guideway, will be what remains when there's 68,000 people living in Midtown Oakville who need to get to work in Vaughan, who need to get to school in Hamilton, or even, of course, who need to take the GO train to downtown Toronto. Next slide. Thank you. So I know it's unrealistic to believe this will lead to any sort of LRT being built, but as someone who has dealt with these processes and with the complexities of building within highly developed areas like Midtown Oakville plans to become, please take these recommendations into consideration. If ABRT is chosen, which is likely along the Trafalgar corridor, please ensure that it is future-proofed for future expansion. It will simply not be feasible to convert existing road network into an LRT once Midtown Oakville. Right now, you'd be disrupting 5,000 residents. In 2061, you'd be disrupting 60,000. This is a big distinction, especially in consideration to traffic. Additionally, these from the original bid phase, the environmental, I'm sure you all know this, the environmental assessments, all of that takes a long time. If you plan to do anything, start doing it now before the developers start putting up their condos and you're still wondering what's going to happen to 16 Mile Creek. Additionally, if no elevated guideways are built, you already saw the QEW one across to Oakville Place, but also I do believe an independent pedestrian connection spanning the 16 Mile Creek Valley would be very useful to residents, to seniors living in that area who would want to, for example, go shopping in Kerr Village, but simply would lack the ability to make I barely have the ability to make that hill. And additionally, this would allow more closer neighborhoods to benefit further from the economic growth that Midtown Oakville plans to bring. And then finally, a bit of a side note, just Oakville Go at the moment is the second most used station on the entire Go network, behind only Union Station. And we're planning on putting 68,000 people, if even half of those people, if even a third of those people go to downtown Toronto every day, what's presently there in Oakville Go will be completely insufficient, and in terms of the platform width, in terms of accessibility. So again, while you have the space, while you have the time, and while you have the political will to do it, I'd recommend a capacity upgrades at Oakville Go. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information, sir. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Elizabeth Chalmers on behalf of Joshua Creek Residents Association, and following her will be Wayne Steffler and Michael McCollum.
Council, how long do you want, how many days do you want to do this?
As long as it takes, Mayor Burton.
All righty. Well, I think council is best advised to hear the delegations and then offer their thoughts to the staff to add to the list rather than to engage in expanding the discussion. Everything you might, we're going to get to a point where you get to say to staff, please add this, that, and the other thing. And that should serve us here. This is the issue identification meeting. So I'm suggesting that it would be a better use of our time if we did not question each delegation, but rather remember the purpose of the meeting, which is to identify the issues and give them to staff to come back on.
I'll challenge the chair. We are here, we want to hear from the people. If she has a question. Oh, sorry, okay.
All right,
Mayor
Councillor-
Burton, I challenge the chair on that ruling.
Councillor, I yield to the demand. Councillor Haslett-Deal, you have the floor, and Mr. Livano, could you come back? Councillor Haslett-Deal has some questions for you.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for the detailed presentation and for sharing your knowledge and your experience. You obviously have a lot of insight into something that is critical to a lot of people around transportation. The only point of clarity I wanted to understand is just, and I just want to make sure I'm clear so that when I look at future notes, I make sure it's covered. You talked about a rapid bus, which is a long-term plan for Trafalgar. But what you're really saying to us is when you design that system or when you're putting it in, make sure that you also have the infrastructure for the LRT.
So I worked for the Huron-Ontario LRT project in Mississauga, and we used to joke that the LRT project was actually a utility relocation project with an LRT on top of it. So what I'm saying is these processes, relocating water mains, relocating electrical stuff, making room for overhead cable systems in a hypothetical LRT, these take time, these are intrusive, right? And I'd hate for the town of Oakville to get into a situation where it builds Trafalgar Road up to accommodate Midtown Oakville, and then 20 years down the line, we have to cut it all up again because we decided, okay, now there's a ton of people here, we want to put in an LRT. And then another big part of the Huron-Ontario LRT project was the bridge rehabilitations for the bridges over the highways, QW 403, 407, to either have the underpass for the LRT or to have the bridge have the strength to withstand the LRT passing over the highway. So the Mississauga Transitway conducted all of those works, and then for example, all the bridges, they're tall enough and shaped for an LRT train, not for a GO bus, for example. So by conducting all of those works early and then allowing the corridor to grow around the transitway, they're able to not overinvest early and have an LRT running with 3 people on it in rush hour, while also being ready for the estimated and planned growth of the corridor without being in construction for a very long time at either phase.
Thank you very much for your time and for your clarification. I do appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett-Hill, for clarifying that. Councillor Grant.
And just very quickly, given the time that we have, I've been pushing for BRT for years. I would like to, through your auspices, suggest that we get staff to talk to this young man about some of his ideas through transit to talk about getting the BRT running. I realize it's mostly a provincial thing, but certainly it would be nice to have his ideas on the books.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Mr. Levano, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Have a good one.
Ms. Chalmers, you're welcome again.
Try
We
it
look
again.
forward to your information.
Thank you. So I'm Elizabeth Chalmers, and I'm here tonight as the president of the Joshua Creek Residents Association. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on the town's proposed Midtown OPA. JCRA is very appreciative of the town's commitment to public dialogue and feedback on Midtown. And we would also like to thank planning staff for their time and efforts addressing the many challenges and opportunities that Midtown presents. I should also note that JCRA is a member of We Love Oakville in good standing. We've paid our fee, and we concur with many of the with their presentation as well. So what I just wanted to do is, I recognize the time crunch tonight, and a large number of people speaks to the level of concern about Midtown. So I just thought I'd highlight JCRA's key concerns and issues at this time. So firstly, we think density is the most critical issue because it's the most impactful on the existing and future community with respect to the infrastructure and services that are needed by the community, and that of course function most effectively when they're sufficient for the size of the community. And I'm talking about the road network, transit, schools, libraries, emergency services, recreation facilities. So we've recently reviewed through some analysis by a local resident that shows a significant increase in the number of residents based on changes to the permitted floor area coverage. And that estimate is 120,000 residents. So that's substantially different than what we're hearing in the town presentation. And I think we want to make sure that we understand why there is that range and how we get there. Because, number two, infrastructure capacity is a major concern if there is a massive expansion of population, which could potentially overwhelm the existing community. And clearly a community the size of 100,000 plus people would need significantly more services, hospital, police, fire, et cetera. So we don't want to be in a situation where the remainder of Oakville is expected to absorb a huge amount of capacity over infrastructure issues. So next, population for Midtown. Again, the numbers are varying. And so a couple of questions. What is the target population for Midtown? How will we get what density will deliver that population? Will the density in the proposed OPA do that? Will it exceed the population targeted? What population results if every property owner is provided with exemptions or additional density in exchange for providing the needed amenities and services, the incentivizing? Is there a ceiling on the population that additional density or density transfers could yield? How will we ensure that the jobs numbers are going to, I guess, come to fruition, particularly given the changes that the 2023 provincial planning statement is proposing to remove all employment uses except industrial, manufacturing, and large-scale warehousing. So we need to ensure that we have accurate population numbers for Midtown. Floor story index takes a minute to say it. So we're proposing a range 4 to 10 north of the tracks, 2 to 6 south of the tracks, 2 to 4 south of the tracks. We would have to assume that all properties are going to develop at the maximum floor story index. If you're a for-profit property owner, you're going to maximize your profit. I don't know how we would incentivize them to take a lower floor story index. So we would, and we've seen that, right, with some of the site plan applications that have come forward. So the floor story index definitely has to ensure that we yield the right population, but at the same time, we would suggest that it should yield less than the mandated population, given the town is proposing to add additional density in exchange through the incentivizing program. It's really important to get the FSI right in the OPA, because we cannot go back and downsize what is permitted at this time. And even if we have every 5 years reviewing the OP, we're not going to be able to change what a property owner was permitted when they first bought the property. So it has to be done at the beginning. And I appreciate the idea that we can monitor it, but it's not going to have an impact if we have too high of a density. Despite using floor story index, building heights are a key driver of density. And higher building heights in Midtown do make sense, given the proximity to the Oakville GO station, as previously noted, the second busiest after Union. But the target that was set for Midtown originally, the 20,000 residents, would have been achieved with the originally proposed 12 to 20-story buildings. So increasing building heights to what we're seeing in site plan applications of 58 stories is going to exponentially increase the density in the population. And while Oakville's targets have been raised by the province, it's great that Midtown is now going to be mixed use on both sides of Trafalgar Road. So I assume that can take some of the pressure for the residential increases. But I don't understand the rationale for excessively high buildings. And I'm thinking 58 stories when I say that. I don't think it will change density anywhere else. Bill 23 has given every property, every single home zone property on the province of Ontario, the right to add 2 more units. So in the JCRA community, we have approximately 2,000 homes. We can grow to 6,000 homes because of Bill 23, and adding extra density in Midtown isn't going to change that in any of the other communities. Okay, so unit size is a broad mixture of unit sizes, i.e. 2 and 3 bedrooms, a range of affordable or pricing for different units. We should be asking for minimums as part of site plan approval, not as part of additional density. And the requirements don't have to be onerous. I mean, they need to be agreed by property owners and developers. But if we set small minimums for every building, it's achievable, and we will deliver a good mix of housing options throughout Midtown. The concerns we have around adding density or the density transfer is that we are using this range of 4 to 10, and as I said, I think we can expect 10. Can we not lower the FSI to a maximum of 4 north of the tracks and 2 south, so that we have a lot more flexibility on that added density to get those services and amenities that we want to have? It would seem to us that it would make more sense and ensure that we don't have that exponential population and density if we can do that. The OPA needs to have clear, specific, strong language to ensure that the town's vision is communicated in a way that may deter a property owner unhappy with the town planning decision from going to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and it will hold up in any potential Ontario Land Tribunal hearings. And finally, the other final suggestion or point we wanted to make is JCRA has advocated for external reviews on site plan applications that have significant impacts on residents. Given that Midtown's impact will be felt across the entirety of Oakville, will there be an additional level of review for Midtown before we approve an amended OPA? As noted previously, getting the FSI right is critical. So taking more time up front to ensure those population targets, the FSI levels, the density reflect Oakville's vision for Midtown, and to ensuring that we are employing best practices and innovative options can help ensure the development of Midtown and the future growth in Oakville are in the best interests of both current and future residents. So thank you for your consideration. I don't know if you got a copy of my presentation, but I'm happy to email it to you after I do a bit more cleanup. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your information. We'd be very pleased to receive a copy.
Okay.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
Thank you.
The next delegation is Wayne Steffler and Michelle McCollum from Future Energy Oakville, and following them will be Ben Sprossen.
Ms. McCollum and Mr. Steffler?
And those two delegations are virtual.
So they're logging in now as we speak. I'm going to assume we'll see them. I see Mr. Steffler logging in right now. And I think we can hear you, Mr. Steffler.
Hello, you can see me.
And see you, and welcome Ms. McCollum as well.
Michelle.
Please
Michelle
begin.
will, yeah.
Hello, a very good evening. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Michelle McCollum, and I'm Vice Chair of Future Energy Oakville, and joined tonight by Wayne Steffler, who's our Interim Executive Director, and together we're pleased to delegate on behalf of FEO and our Board of Directors. We are a non-profit organisation created through the Oakville Energy Strategy by the work of the Energy Task Force and endorsed by Council back in 2020. So Wayne and I are here to provide a little bit of background on FEO and share our thoughts on the proposed Midtown development and alignment with the Community Energy Strategy, and also share some of our thoughts and recommendations for your consideration. So I'm going to turn over to Wayne right now, and then I'll be back in a few minutes.
Thanks, Michelle. Can we go to the next slide? So FEO clarified its mandate earlier this year. The core vision remains the same, which is to accelerate the transition to a low carbon economy. What we've made more explicit is the next bullet, which are actions to engage the community with talks, workshops, showcasing best practices and innovative solutions, and advocating for policy changes. The final part of the mandate is to emphasize that our approach will be positive, collaborative, and measurable. Next slide, please. Therefore, FEO has developed an implementation plan for this year, which will focus on advocacy and developing community of practices. We are planning thought leadership events, workshops, and webinars for this year. Related to the discussion tonight, we wish to work with various stakeholders on green development standards for Oakville. Also, the world has changed significantly over the past few years, so we think an assessment of the CES strategy should be completed as well. Now I'll pass it back to Michelle, who will talk more specifically about Midtown. Next slide, please.
Great, thanks so much. So, you know, Midtown is a huge opportunity for the future of Oakville, for the future of our people, our community. And I'd really like to talk about alignment of the OPA with the community energy strategy and what the opportunities are there. So a reminder that we have some very aggressive targets for the town of Oakville for energy efficiency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So increasing energy efficiency by at least 40% by 2041. And getting the transition towards carbon neutrality by at least 50% by 2041. And that is not going to be easy. That is going to be a huge challenge. And we have to take advantage of every opportunity we have. And Midtown is a very big opportunity for us. Just in terms of alignment with some of the projects, I'm not going to go through all of these, but home and building efficiency targets, ensuring that what we build new meets the standards that we set, and that's embedded into policy. District energy, this is a fantastic opportunity to think about a district energy network, greater resilience, energy efficiency. We can link to existing systems such as the one that Sheridan College has in place in their campus. And when we think about that FSI calculation and the need to create space, if we have multiple mechanical spaces take up a lot of room. If we can reduce that, you can also really increase the usable space within the development. Happy to see, you know, calling out for a community energy plan, which can help to identify these opportunities. Also, we need to think about local energy supply and distribution in the development. A great opportunity to think about demand response, thermal storage, architectural technology, and many other technologies that, you know, you have to really embed those from the start and plan the development to incorporate those right from the start. And of course, you know, having the chance in this development to think about a development that's really orientated around transit, regional and local connectivity, and around active transportation. That is huge in terms of our goals around transportation. And of course, EV chargers built in, and overall ensuring that we have smart infrastructure to be able to really support this broader community. Next slide, please. So while we do appreciate the reference to the Oakville energy strategy within the documentation, we also believe that it's really important to be much more overt and directive with the development community about the expectations for this development. And that will both help us with the outcomes that we're looking for, but also in really assist the development community in what they need to expect. And a great example that I'm sure council and staff are all aware of are the Toronto Green Standards, which have tiered levels for targeting really specific energy efficiency and sustainability requirements. And that's tied into the site plan approval process. So we would be, you know, really supportive of thinking about how this could be, you know, better embedded into the Oakville processes. Next slide. So we're not just here to provide feedback tonight, but we're also here to offer our help in the process. So we're happy to support with workshops, subject matter expertise, leveraging the Oakville Energy Task Force members, you know, identifying where there are potential partnerships, and also happy to review and provide feedback on the proposed integrated energy master plan. So in short, we would recommend that we have more specificity and more detail, that those requirements are embedded into policy or into process, which are two different ways of thinking about this, recognizing that this is a really significant opportunity. So thank you so much for your time. I want to be respectful of everybody's time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Councillor Giddings would like to ask a few questions there, and Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much for joining us online this evening. Very encouraging to hear your comments. And the official plan talks about the need for green energy and district energy and geothermal and so on. Currently, the OPA talks about promoting the use of that. So you would feel more comfortable if it had shall, I assume?
I think being more specific is really helpful to everyone. And so, you know, not knowing the specific mechanism to make that happen, but I think the wording here is really important in terms of, and I say that both ways. So some of the development community, you know, I work in my day job as well, are really up and understand. Like they're really promoting great work here, but not all developers are equal. And so if you have a mixture of developers actually doing this work, you have to make sure that you have consistency. So being more directive and being more explicit within the mechanisms that we have for the development, it's just helpful to all, both in the outcomes and the developers going into this upfront. In FEO as well, we're also happy to connect developers to the partners we have in the task force as well, like Minto, for example, who are on our task force, who can help to provide and share information about their work, their geothermal systems, for example, in Oakville.
So in terms of setting expectations and removing any sort of ambiguity, I know we're pressed for time. Do you have a quick comment about green building standards in terms of?
Yeah, I think I shared that in the presentation. I think the City of Toronto are, from my perspective, and I work with them in my day job around that as well. You know, having all of that work really outlined very explicitly is very helpful.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much, through your worship. Have you seen green standards embedded in an OPA before, or is it only at the site plan level?
I'm not familiar with it at an OPA level, but I am familiar with it in a site plan approval level.
Okay, and have you had a chance to sit down with our staff and provide your input to them to this point forward?
No, councillor, haven't. So just recently taken over as vice chair, but I'd be happy to connect further with city staff to have that conversation. Be delighted to do so.
Perfect. And seeing how we've already expressed a timeline to bring a recommendation report forward in, I think, about a month from now, and knowing that the report needs to get written before there and all that other stuff, do you think there's adequate time for you to have what I would say would be substantial input into that stuff, or would you prefer to have a little more time than a few weeks?
I would be happy to work with city staff, just in terms of their timelines and our timelines and our capacity to be able to assist.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Madam Clerk, could you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Ben Sprosson, and following him will be Carolyn McMinn.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Sprosson. I'm an architectural technologist and a second-generation developer in Oakville, and a strong believer that good housing and community design can improve people's lives. My wife is 42 weeks pregnant and here also, so I might have to leave at any moment. I work for Design Quorum Inc., a local architectural firm and developer, and have looked at the proposed amendment and presented it graphically at its theoretical maximum. While not suggesting that anything like this is probable, I am concerned that the current proposed amendment could open up the door to much more growth than the province is requiring. I think my position for Midtown is probably perfectly located in this argument to alienate all sides of the conversation, so I'm going to try and stick to the numbers. We need to accommodate more housing in Oakville, and areas like Midtown are prime candidates for higher development densities than we are used to. Can I have the next slide, please? And the language in this plan clearly expresses the desire to create a strong and livable community. But from my analysis, I worry that the densities and building types that this plan could allow for will exceed the growth that we need. I would like to quickly walk through my numbers, although Jeff's numbers were very helpful, that I've made available online. To be clear, these are theoretical densities of what's achievable, so it's not to say this is exactly what will go in, simply that the plan needs to be altered to prevent unintended consequences that could compromise the vision and sustainability of the Midtown development going forward. Next slide, please. My modeling, very similar to Jeff's, was based on two key factors, and that's the developable area and the number of units that you can expect to see in that area. I got the developable areas by measuring using the town's website originally, but after reaching out after the open house, the more accurate measurements were made available by the town. So this shows 47.3 developable hectares, but does not include land that is needed to be provided for the town's roads. Next slide, please. To estimate the number of units, as Jeff said, you first need the FSI, which is a ratio of the buildable floor area to the size of the property. So in 1 hectare, or 10,000 square meters of property at 10 FSI, you can build 100,000 square meters, and at 4, you can build 40. Now we can determine how many units there could be, dividing the number by the average floor space per unit. This number was around 78 square meters per unit on the existing proposals in the area. Dividing the buildable floor area by the area units gives us an estimate of the number of units possible. This calculation needs to be done for the different densities, and I also assumed the maximum of 10, 6, and 4. This gives us a rough estimate of the total units. Next slide, please. After this, I began to apply some of the rules that can be found in the OPA to increase your density. Section 20.3.8 states that the gross floor area calculated by using the maximum floor space index as shown on Schedule L2 for a portion of the lot that is to be dedicated to the town for a public road, public park, or other open space may be transferred to the retained lot, as Jeff was showing in the, I don't want to call it bonusing, I guess the exemptions portion. I interpreted this to mean that you can add the area of the roads conveyed to your total buildable area. Therefore, for the purpose of calculating density and population, the buildable area is actually 58.8 hectares, and a further roughly 5.5 hectares are possible if you interpret density compatible with the utility corridor to allow for future development of the Metrolinx lands. This increase would bring our number of units to a possible 66,410, again, based on the 78 square meters per unit. Next slide, please. Then we multiply this number by 1.7 people per unit, and this allows us to give an estimate of closer to 113,000 people living in Midtown. Again, this is a theoretical maximum, but that's what this plan would allow for. Next slide, please. Another provision allowing for additional density that Jeff mentioned is the 2 and 3 bedroom exemption. Section 20.3.8D states that up to 50% of the net floor area of 2 and 3 bedroom units when provided in developments where more than 25% of the total residential units are provided as 2 and 3 bedroom units can be added on top of the density. I calculated the additional floor area that this exemption would allow by using an existing proposal that is close to 10 FSI. Based on the stated area of 2 and 3 bedroom units and the number of each, a total of roughly 35,000 additional square meters of space was created. This equates to roughly 440 units in addition above the 1,700 units shown on this 1.2 hectare site. This is an increase of around 25%. I use this number as an estimate for what would be possible across properties zoned urban core. Next slide, please. The result would be an allowable population of around 137,500 people. These numbers do not include job densities, as I found it difficult to predict that. Next slide, please. I would like to mention again that these are theoretical numbers. They don't necessarily recommend or speak to what will be there, but they are plausible under this OPA. While I put a lot of work in, I'm not an economist or a planner, and I made an error somewhere in my interpretation, modeling, and communication. I apologize if I have, but based on Jeff's numbers, I think I'm fairly close. But I saw a need for some sort of interpretation to create an open conversation around this, and I'm glad that Jeff has brought the town side of that argument. I would like to see Midtown projects getting underway quickly. The developers who build these sites are excellent at building, and I don't doubt that they will do an incredible job, but their responsibility ends at the property lines. It is this plan that will determine what the Midtown community will look like as a whole. I think we need more clarity on what the vision is in terms of density numbers, which Jeff's numbers have helped with, but even throughout the other growth areas in Oakville, and to see where Midtown fits into this. I have a young daughter and a son who's on the way at any moment, and I want to ensure that this development keeps Oakville the amazing place that I grew up for generations to come, so they choose to stay close to home when they're my age. I would also like to quickly speak to some of the numbers that Jeff put out. The 68,000, I think, is a very reasonable number to assume if you're not including the exemptions. But my projections based on the current proposals were closer to 120,000, extrapolating again, just assuming that everything would be built the same as that, and I don't think that's necessarily realistic, but it could be something close. I think we need to look at how those projections were made, as the linear progression after the 68,000 I don't think is realistic, and we need to start at a point of a goal and work backwards from there. I don't think anyone would argue with me that 120,000 people is probably overkill for Midtown Oakville. I'd like to thank everyone, and I'm glad we have such a great turnout tonight, and I thank the councilors and the mayor for their time.
Thank you very much for your information. Councillor Dudek has a question for you. Mr. Sprossen, you've got a question from Councillor Dudek.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for all your work and effort you put into this, especially giving the pending arrival of the next edition. That's admirable. I wonder if you could give us a copy of your presentation so that we might have it in hand. We were all sort of making various notes.
Absolutely. I'd gladly make it available. I have an Excel sheet that captures it, but it's a little messy.
Okay, if you can provide that, all the better. That would be great. And through to staff, maybe at an appropriate time in the future, they can comment on the calculations that were provided. Don't expect it tonight, but again, thank you very much for your hard work.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councillor, that's exactly the purpose of the meeting and the collection of these issues. Councillor McNeice?
Sorry, just one more question for you, Ben.
He wants to get out.
I know you've got more important things going on, but would you mind just pulling up the presentation to the clerk just for a second? If we could back up, just your second slide there. If we could go back. So your pictures on the right sort of depicting, I think you're trying to depict a vibrant commercial area there of what you'd sort of envision in Midtown. I noticed the built form is quite a bit different there. It's more of a European built form that still brings in a lot of density in a different way. Do you have any thoughts on different ways of bringing density to Midtown?
I have a lot actually. I've looked into it. These pictures are actually the images that were provided by the town. I took them from the website. I hope that's okay. Then they do depict a 6-story development. I think the implication here was meant to be that this would be the podium and that the towers would be in the back. I've built several models that show what different densities to achieve the target population would look like. I assumed a higher rate of development, so maybe that would be the difference in our numbers. But something closer to this style was definitely what I was aiming for, and I was able to get numbers close to the targets or above the targets, depending on the use of exemptions, at something closer to 4 FSI. But again, I haven't made those available. My concern was more to open the dialogue around these things with the town. I had questions at the open house that I felt weren't answered adequately. So, and again, they were very helpful afterwards. Everyone was very helpful in addressing my concerns. But I just think a more open conversation and a clarity on the numbers and the growth targets throughout the regions of Oakville would be helpful in targeting an appropriate density for Midtown.
Okay, it sounds like you're saying there's more than one way to achieve the density target.
Exactly, and I think Jeff showed some of that in his style. I think a 10 FSI is quite an extreme number. I know the number that's been floating around is the Manhattan number, which again is all of Manhattan, so isn't necessarily a fair representation. But those numbers would be much closer to something in the 500 people per hectare range. And based on current applications, which I think fit well under this new OPA, we would be, again, closer to that 1,200 people per hectare. So gotcha. I just think that discrepancy means there's need for more dialogue around where the numbers were arrived at.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please. Oh, sorry.
One more. Wait, there's more. Thank you very much for joining us. I've looked at a lot of your material. Do you have any comments about the time frame of your projection? Because you've got this sort of like end goal number, but as you saw from our staff, there's actually a progression that happens over the course of 10, 20, 50, 60 years.
Absolutely. And I'm not an expert on that. There are developers here, I'm sure, could speak to it much better than I can. We're a small developer. I looked at, to try and get an example that might not, I don't know how well referenced it would be, but Liberty Village in Toronto. And in 2005, it was basically a series of condos. And by 2020, I think we all know Liberty Village is quite a higher density. I'm not saying that that was an example that I looked at to try and give an idea, but I would like to see policies maybe to help get that process started of development quicker rather than increasing the end goal density policies that would help increase this earlier development phase. So I think I agree that is probably my main concern, that projecting those development progressions are difficult, I assume. Again, I'm not an expert on it, but
okay. And you've recognized that you've put out numbers that are, if everything went perfectly at exactly the right time and there was no issue on any site and...
Well, yeah, I think the use of FSI does allow for an efficient use of like basically any site. You could maximize what could go there, especially without height requirements. So I'm not so worried about that, but the idea that the whole area would get developed quickly, or even that it would be exactly as I'm shown, those are just, my concern was more that the OPA allows in theory for that, not that that is exactly what will go there. I don't want to make projections, and I'm not assuming that that would be what would be there. But I do assume that for the most part, people tend to develop to the higher end of densities, and I think that's the right thing to do. It's just that that density has to be appropriate.
Great, thanks very much. And like Councillor Dudek, I look forward to our staff providing comment on the material.
Thank you very much. Again. Checking again. Madam Clerk, we may be able to call the next delegation now.
The next delegation is Carolyn McMinn from the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association, and following that delegation will be David Mallon.
Welcome, Ms. McMinn. Council looks forward to your information.
Well, good evening, Mayor Burton, councillors, staff, and members of the public. And thank you very much, Ben, because you and I are basically singing from the same hymn sheet. I have had some very similar numbers to Ben, and again, the theoretical build-outs of what actually could happen in Midtown. I'm the president of the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association, and Midtown is actually in our back door. Without a shadow of a doubt, this is the most important delegation that TCRA will ever give to council. I'd also like to say we support everything that We Love Oakville said as well, and we are founding members of We Love Oakville too. Could I have the next slide, please? We would like to acknowledge the significant time and resources that the town of Oakville has put into developing the current draft Midtown Official Plan Amendment. Make no bones about it, TCRA, we want Midtown to be developed. We love and support the vision to create a complete community, and the first few pages read like a fairy tale. A new community complete with educational facilities, professional services, doctors and pharmacies, grocery and clothing stores, restaurants, children frolicking in playgrounds and splash pads, wide tree-lined promenades and parks for dog walking and picnics, linked by active transportation pathways, and all within easy and safe walking distance of the GO train, enabling quick and efficient access to downtown Toronto offices. However, our worry is that little of this vision will ever be realised when the detail contained in the subsequent pages of the draft OPA is analysed. Could I have the next slide, please? If you take a close look at this picture, I want to ask you, will this be Midtown Oakville? This city is actually Toronto, and I have just cropped the photo so that you can't see the CN Tower, and also to try and make you sort of wonder a little bit about, what it could be. The density of downtown Toronto in 2016 was 446 people and jobs per hectare, split 143 residents and 303 jobs. Clearly this has changed post-COVID. Unfortunately, there were no accurate statistics available for the number of people still commuting downtown each day for work. However, the number of residents per hectare is now approximately 160 as per the most recent census. The potential population density that could result from the current draft Midtown OPA will be far greater than that of downtown Toronto. Could I have the next slide, please? So here are some key facts about the Midtown development. We've heard, and I'm going to reiterate it, that the province requires a minimum density of 200 people and jobs per hectare in Midtown by 2031 and 400 people and jobs per hectare by 2051. This requirement equates to a population of 20,600 people and jobs by 2031 and 41,200 by 2051 on the gross area of Midtown, which is 103 hectare or just over 1 square kilometre. The Midtown OPA, as written, will allow building to accommodate a total population of around 126,500 people, plus 68,100 jobs by 2051, if we use the ratio that the staff have put forward to us previously, being 65% would be residents and 35% would employment. I have heard recently that that might be changing a little bit to more like 80% residents and 20% employment. But even so, so if that was 126,000, it takes us to roughly 160,000 total population. But using my numbers there, that's a density of 4,525 people and jobs per hectare in the 43 developable hectares. And again, 43 hectares was what we were working with. It's an 8% change, I think, on the 47.3 hectares that were discussed earlier. So you have to take that into consideration. But, you know, private owners obviously have a profit incentive to develop their properties to the maximum allowed. Any property owner would. Floor space index is the zoning tool that Oakville will use to control the population density of the entire Midtown development. As I understand, it is now impossible to restrict building heights. Could I have the next slide, please? So let's talk about floor space index, and thank you very much, Jeff, who did such an awesome job of explaining it for me, and to everyone. So the draft amendment will allow building with a floor space index of up to 10 on the majority of the developable area of Midtown. So therefore, a building with a floor space index of 10 a building with a floor space index of 10 has a floor area equal to 10 times the area on the lot. If all of the maximum 43 hectares were to be developed to the maximum floor space index, the population of people and jobs would exceed 190,000, or about 5 times what the province is actually requiring. So how did I get to these numbers? Well, I did number crunching, just like Ben, and as you know, TCRA likes to crunch numbers. If floor space index of 10 is used over 43 hectares, that's 4.3 million square metres, or about 46 million square feet that could be built. So if the average unit size was around about 800 square feet, and that includes all your communal areas like your elevators and your utility rooms and all that, with 2.2 people per unit, which is what the province uses, and given that we seem to be using mainly provincial figures, I'm using people per unit of 2.2, that would equate to 57,500 housing units with a potential population of 126,500 residents. And again, as I said, what about jobs? Well, if jobs was 35% and population is 65%, that's 68,100 jobs. So in my opinion, and my humble opinion, a floor space index of 4 is far more palatable. And just to give you an example of what floor space index of 4 would look like on a 1 hectare block, okay, that translates to one 53-storey tower on a 1 hectare block with a 750 square metre floor plate, which is what is in the OPA. That does exclude the podium, and the podium can be up to 6 stories in height. So on a 1 hectare site with 10 800 square foot units per floor, that would give us 1,166 people over the 53 stories. Now that 53 stories could also be built like separately. So you could have, say, 14 stories, 18 stories, and 21 stories on the 1 hectare plot, which still gives you the 53 stories. It still gives you a floor space index of 4, and it still gives you the 1,166 people, which is more than adequate to reach the 41,500 or so people required by the province in Midtown. Could I have the next slide, please? So consequences of this is that once the draft OPA is approved, the upper limit on floor space index will be fixed, which will in turn fix the value of the land. It will be nearly impossible for any future governments at any level to roll this back. Any developer trying to maximise profits will build to the maximum allowed and potentially will seek exemptions to build more. And let's face it, I've never seen a developer that hasn't asked for an exemption yet. The extreme resulting population density will have ramifications for every aspect of life, not just Midtown, but for the whole of Oakville and beyond. This will not create a livable Oakville nor a complete community. The population density will be far greater than the site can sustain and completely overwhelm the ability to provide supporting services. Next slide, please. As you can well imagine, there will be some significant unintended and not livable consequences. Imagine the traffic chaos when you have Uber drivers because no one has a car. You have Amazon deliveries, you have Uber Eats deliveries, you have maintenance vehicles for the swimming pools, tennis courts, HVAC systems, and garbage disposal, all crowding on these roads. There will be insufficient area for parks, which can lead to social problems. The small sizes of the retail areas currently proposed are going to lead to problems as well because people will have to order Uber Eats because there won't be large enough grocery stores. We also risk untimely and insufficient educational and daycare facilities, as these seem to lag a long way behind the population increase. Insufficient space for public amenities, as well as indoor and outdoor sporting facilities and recreation facilities, also contribute to social issues. And there will also be a lack of safe access to transportation links via both public and private networks, and insufficient transit options for that level of population density. In terms of active transportation, we're also majorly lacking sufficient access across the 16 Mile Creek Bridge, as well as over the QEW and the railway tracks. So next slide, please. In conclusion, let's allow development of a floor space index of 4 in varying unit sizes that allow both young singles as well as families with children to move in and become part of our community. It is more than sufficient for the required population to 2031 and beyond. I've already explained the 53-story tower bit, so we'll skip that. But let's put green space in the form of attractive parks and playgrounds and walking trails, safely linking the various parcels of land currently being proposed for development. We would like to see the creation of a special committee that reviews the draft OPA with urban planning experts and would benefit the public in the final OPA. Reviewing population forecasts and the completion of the master plans that will provide key inputs to building the complete community, such as parks, recreation, and library plans, is vital to success. Let's create a legacy we can be proud of for future residents and future generations who will live here. The future of Oakville is in your hands. And I did it!
Thank you very much. Take another bow. All right.
No questions?
Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for a very, very good presentation, extremely thorough, and I like the suggestions you provided therein. Towards the end, you made reference to striking or some sort of a committee. Are you inferring something like Livable Oakville that we had, where there was ward representatives or something? I didn't quite know where you were headed with that.
Well, it's kind of a nebulous idea that the TCRA have spoken about for a while on and off, and having community leaders as well as the town staff and developers and everyone sitting at a table and reviewing what's going on. I understand that the consultants have now been employed, which is fantastic, but this is about the execution and the making sure that everyone's needs are being met and that everyone is being listened to and things are being implemented the way that they should be. So just, and having that feedback to the community as well. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar.
Thank you, through Mayor Burton. Can we get a copy of that presentation?
It was emailed earlier, and there's also a letter accompanying it that has all my calculations.
Perfect, I appreciate
So
that.
it was emailed earlier.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Clerk, I think we can call the next delegation.
The next delegation is David Mallon, and following him will be George Niblock.
Welcome, Mr. Mallon. Council looks forward to your information.
Tough act to follow, eh? Mayor Burton, councillors, town staff, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to present CMGRA views concerning the development of Midtown. CMGRA has supported in previous submissions and continues to support development in the area known as Midtown because it is a unique location, a unique opportunity, currently underdeveloped, and as such, a real opportunity for redevelopment and densification. So we're on side with the principle here of redeveloping Midtown. We're also encouraged as we now see that we have come to the first hurdle in this, what we see is quite a long path. We have been advocating the idea of a complete community since I think before it appeared in the town documentation, but certainly since then. And I think we're almost at that first hurdle in as much as we now have a director, and we now have director of Midtown, I should say, and we now have a lot of people talking about what represents a complete community. We would suggest that just building condos in accordance with the developer's proposals would not result in a complete community. The growth targets have been established by the province of initially 20,000 by 2031 and are estimating as many as 68,000 at build-out many years in the future. As town planning documents have clearly stated, the development will require all of the components of a complete community in order to accommodate and serve the new residents. The success or otherwise of this development will be evidenced by a strong interest in Midtown by home seekers, those people who are looking for a good place to live, raise a family. That's what Oakville is known for, amongst other things. And an acceptance and integration with the existing community in Oakville as well. The development itself, there's several developments going on with these condos, have to be attractive for new residents to want to buy the properties or rent the properties, as is the case, and has to be attractive for new residents to want to live in Midtown. If it is not attractive to them because there are too many people or because they don't like the tall buildings or whatever the reasons, they won't want to buy, they won't want to rent, they won't want anything to do with it, and it will fail. So this is an area that has to be borne in mind not only by the town planners, but the developers as well. They want success just as much as we residents want success. To achieve this success, CMGRA has identified what we believe are 5 key issues, which in our view will need to be addressed to ensure that Midtown will become a complete community. We see these as the next hurdles coming up, not hurdles in the past. Number 1, population density. Well, I really can't say much more about that. The last 2 speakers have discussed that at length. But we have a little bit different take on it. We see the need for social space and social interaction opportunities as healthy in a community. These opportunities will avoid stress from overcrowding and dissatisfaction within the community. Concerns have been raised that the planned density is excessive and much higher than current densities in downtown Toronto and US cities. This isn't necessarily healthy. We really need to think about this population density issue. It can become a poor issue to have to deal with if we just have too many people and too many stresses. Our second item, building heights. Taller buildings, residents, and in particular seniors, tend to become isolated due to lack of social interaction opportunity. In addition, timely response of emergency services is more challenging as the building increases in height. Both of these points were brought up by a currently serving police officer at the mayor's, what we used to call, so if you will allow me to say so, the mayor's breakfast, very recently, 18th of May. These are just a couple of the points about building heights and what kind of problems can arise from them. Mobility issues. At present, Midtown is cut off from adjacent areas to the north, east, and south. Those are QEW, Trafalgar Road, and the railroad. Each of these corridors will require improved access, both to pedestrians and vehicles. And that's really, I'm talking here about access to cross them just as much as access to get onto them. This will require the cooperation and support of MTO and Metrolinx to provide effective, safe solutions. Their role in planning, being responsible for roads, trunk roads, rail, services commuting into Toronto, or even via rail, are going to be essential in finding answers for those problems, those challenges. Fourth item, parkland and recreational facilities. Currently, it appears that minimal green space will be available in Midtown. This is unfortunate, and it will reduce the appeal of the development and maybe even its success or its degree of success. Examples from somewhat similar development, and I'm thinking specifically of Vancouver, have demonstrated, where, by the way, they have 60-story towers in similar nodes of development, have demonstrated the need for green space to escape from the high-rise condos. When you get to the point and you're living in a high-rise condo and you really have to get out there, those green spaces become invaluable. And I've seen it in Vancouver where you get many dozens, if not hundreds of people out there early in the morning, taking every advantage of that green space. Number 5, financial impact of infrastructure costs. With the reduction in development charges provided from developers, there will be an urgent and evident need for financial support from senior levels of government who have mandated this growth in the schedule. This is going to take a bit of doing, I suspect, in terms of negotiation, but again, it is a serious issue since without the finances to be able to move forward with the infrastructure required for these towers, it will occasionally delay, at least a delay. None of these are trivial issues, and will require determined commitment to achieve a complete community in Midtown. It is a step forward. We note that a director for Midtown has been appointed and a consulting team retained to address this issue. Great, that's a good start. CMGRA has consistently supported development in Midtown. In this endeavor, we have also consistently supported both our town as well as our neighboring residents associations' goal of a complete, affordable, and attractive community. Success in achieving this will be to the benefit of both new and existing residents and the developer community. Our view has always been that the complete community must serve the people who live there. It remains our goal of achieving livable Oakville in Midtown. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your information, sir. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, I think.
The next delegation is George Niblock from the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association, and then Pamela Knight will be after that.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. I'll attempt to be brief. My name's George Niblock. I'm here on behalf of the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association. As a member of the We Love Oakville committee, we'd also like to express our support for the earlier WLO delegation. OLRA supports the Midtown development as an ideal location for population growth and density. We support the development of a complete community, as defined in the OPA. We support the goal of achieving the mandated population goal of 200 people and jobs per hectare by 2031 and 400 by 2051. What is not clear to us is why the OPA recommends a floor space index of 10. We have heard from other delegations tonight that suggests that the stated population targets can be achieved with a much lower FSI number. So our question for staff is this: why start so high? We believe that overshooting the FSI number could be damaging to the goal of achieving a complete community and missing the opportunity to support a diversity of missing middle housing forms as developers and landowners look to maximize potential profits by building to whatever limit is set. I would also like to point out that the current population of Ward 3 is currently less than 30,000 people. The services and amenities, schools, grocery stores, community and rec centers, parks, etc., required by this population gives us some perspective on what will realistically be required by population in Midtown that will exceed this number in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the information and the comments. I'm sure staff will take them into account. Madam Clerk, the next delegation then.
Next delegation is Pamela Knight from Coronation Park Residents Association, and then we will hear from Harry Shaw.
Welcome, Ms. Knight. Council looks forward to your information.
Sorry, I just need this for reference. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak.
Ms. Knight, could you please?
I certainly can.
Thank you very much.
I knew what you were going to say. Normally, I have no problem with that. Anyway, we do indeed, we're sorry to say that we're not in support of the Midtown Oakville draft OPAs that exist right now. We have some concerns, and I'm going to share those with you. Next slide, please. The first is population allocation. And as we've heard this evening, we're looking at a forecast to reach 375,000 people in Oakville by 2051, and that's an increase of about 150,000 people. What we do know is that most of that growth is going to be allocated to areas identified for growth. What we don't know is how our expected growth is being allocated to those areas, what the allocations are based on, where to find the data, et cetera. How then can we properly plan for Midtown's future? In neighboring Mississauga, for instance, there's an online tool that allows users to see forecasts to 2051 for people, units, and employment in each of 56 areas around the city. Next slide, please. We don't have a master plan. There's no overall comprehensive set of elements that identify and illustrate what we can expect. We have no physical depiction showing how development applications that are on hand right now would look in situ. We have no physical model or interactive digital tool that gives people a universal view of Midtown and all of its aspects, nor do we have information on what proposed height and density will create in terms of climate, environment, drainage, water, wastewater requirements, and so on, and nor do we have any information on phasing. Next slide, please. In terms of the environment and sustainability, planning for Midtown raises a range of environmental considerations: microclimates, heat islands, stormwater, air quality, bird-friendly design, and more. A decade ago, and I think a previous delegate mentioned it, there was an EA undertaken to assess the impact of the road changes around Midtown. And when that was completed, they gave us some recommendations like rainwater harvesting, green roofs, infiltration trenches, permeable pavement. Using Christie Lands as an example, they did a very interesting wind speed study that you see at the bottom of the frame. And essentially what it did was suggest that by using an informal winding street and placing buildings along that street, they could reduce wind funneling through the existing surrounding streets. That's the kind of stuff that we want to see for Midtown. Next slide, please. We also have no green development standards. Buildings are the third largest source of emissions in Ontario, accounting for 24% of total emissions. A number of municipalities across Ontario, mainly around here, but Ottawa is part of this as well, and now the City of Toronto, have adopted green development standards. Hamilton and Mississauga are in the process of setting their own. Oakville has no such program. In high-density areas, Halton Hills, for example, requires a green development standards checklist as part of its development application process. It can also request additional sustainability studies to be carried out by qualified professional consultants, retained by and at the expense of the proponent. When we look to the OPA for green development, this is what we found. Green roofs and/or amenity space should be provided on the roof of any building base or above-grade parking structure where the rooftop will be visible from nearby tall buildings. That to us sounds like a green roof is more let's say, bells and whistles to look at rather than something for the environment. Promoting the use of district energy and sustainable building practices. Development within Midtown should incorporate stormwater management on site. That's great. It's a great direction. We'd like to see language that really promotes that more, encourages it more, and directs it more. Next slide, please. Bill 23, when it initially made its debut, was set out to fully remove cities' ability to set green standards for construction, but thankfully some of that was repealed. Municipalities continue to have powers through site plan and bylaws to require biodiversity, green roofs, planting of native species, etc. And I've included a letter here from February 2023 when Minister Clark went so far as to stress that aspects of green standards, including green infrastructure, cool paving, biodiversity, tree plantings, etc., will continue to be optional standards that can be required through municipal bylaw and implemented through site plan control. Green development standards need to play a leading role in Midtown's planned growth. Next slide, please. We wanted to touch on schools. We noticed in the staff report and in the OPA that we've sort of opened the door and invited the aspect of vertical schools. These are created through a public-private partnership, and it's important to remember that companies entering into partnerships with public bodies are there to make a profit. The latest studies on vertical schools note challenges associated with integrating outdoor play spaces and sports facilities, as well as concerns about supervision and safety. And what about portable classrooms? Where will they be situated? I know that the vertical school in Toronto right now that's being planned in the lower precinct, I believe, has leased space, perhaps in the podium. What happens if they need more space to accommodate portable classrooms? The study has also mentioned that experience to date shows that these partnerships don't reliably meet the needs of a lower cost than what governments can supply and are less accountable to the public. Next slide, please. The hated subject, density. The FSI density permissions in the proposed OPA have the potential to result in a Midtown population that is, who knows, 80, 90, 100,000. More than a decade ago, Urban Strategies was retained by the town of Oakville to create the Urban Core Master Plan and Urban Design Guidelines based on 200 people and jobs per hectare. Designs included rapid bus transit on Trafalgar, low-rise residential of 3 and 4 stories, tall buildings were 20 stories, mid-rise were 6 to 12. Plans included a civic center and a school area. Several aspects of the plan, such as using Cross Avenue as a main street, have been continued, but many others have disappeared. As the urban strategy plan was indeed based on the 200 people and jobs per hectare metric, we continue to believe the plan has merit and the ability to create, if modified, a midtown with a higher per hectare density while retaining livability. Next slide, please. So the question is, are we guilty? Are we guilty of creating overdevelopment? Some of us have equated the push for height and density in Midtown to that of forcing a size 12 foot into a size 2 shoe. And we know what happens. Something has to give. Midtown is not our only growth option. To assume that it will accept the lion's share of Oakville's future growth isn't sustainable. Midtown's total developable area is too small to merit the kind of population density that would result from the proposed OPA. That concludes my remarks, and thanks so much for listening.
Thank you very much for all the work you did to bring that to us. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please. Sorry? Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor Elgar, and then Councillor Hazlet-Thiel, and Ms. Knight, could you come back?
Thank you. My only question, Pamela, is can we get a copy of that presentation?
Absolutely.
We have got a wealth of information tonight coming from all the residents that have spoken. This is
I could have
amazing.
answered that from back
Thank you.
there.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure we all agree. Councillor Hazlet-Thiel.
A ditto to Councillor Elgar. Thank you very much. Outstanding. We continue to be blessed with so many talented presentations. The amount of work everybody's putting in is just, I'm incredibly grateful and thankful. I'm sure everyone else is.
We appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Madam Clerk, is Harry Shea ready to present?
And the next delegation following that will be Karen Brock.
Welcome, Mr. Shea. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of Town Council. My name is Harry Shea, and I'm with the Bronte Village Residents Association. I did attend the Midtown Open House on May 9th at Town Hall and the Mayor's CLRT last Thursday. I do not profess to completely understand the size and scope or the complexities of the official plan amendment to update the land use policies for Midtown Oakville in the Livable Oakville Plan. But tonight, I'd like to highlight two concerns and share a personal observation. As identified in the key facts dated in the May 9th public meeting report, Midtown Oakville, an urban growth center, is being planned because urban growth centers are required to be transit supportive to accommodate future population and growth. In the report, Midtown is identified as the second busiest GO station in the GO network. The concern is that beyond the actual changes to the OPA for the Midtown proposal, the precedent we set with the density FSI surrounding the Midtown GO station could be extended to the Bronte GO station, bringing additional density that we might not be adequately prepared for. Developers will do what they do best, and that is develop, and do it where they can, and seeking previous precedences for future applications is not beyond the realm of possibility. So it's imperative that council be firm when evaluating future development applications in Midtown, as they might be the blueprint around the Bronte GO station transit corridor in the future, making a very busy station even busier. Speaking of transit corridors, the intersection of Dundas and Bronte currently has Argo signage already in place. It's my understanding that Dundas is now or will be considered a mass transit corridor in the future, which means what kind of density can we expect in this northwest portion of Dundas and Bronte? Once again, it's about setting a precedent in Midtown, which can be exported elsewhere and possibly there. Second, at the Town Hall Open House, and again at the CLRT, the term piecemeal was used when describing how the different elements in the plan will come together and unfold over time. The concern is that if parks and green space come long after or in a piecemeal manner after housing is completed, the Bronte waterfront and our already overstressed parking situation will only get worse if active public transit from Midtown to Bronte isn't already in place when these developments are completed. There is no question that our Bronte retail merchants will certainly enjoy the increased foot traffic, bringing additional vitality to our area. But unless there's a clear transit plan in place, our parking spaces, including predatory towing, will only intensify. And finally, I've struggled whether or not to share this personal observation. It is purely qualitative and certainly not quantitative, but I felt it was important to share it nonetheless. I've traveled frequently to Europe since the early 80s. Specifically for 10 years, I traveled to Europe twice a year from 2008 to 2018 in the spring and in the fall. Each trip was anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks in length, and on a few occasions, even longer. Specifically, I visited the Netherlands at least a total of 40 weeks over those 10 years. And in that time period, I lived like an expat, primarily living in 2 private homes in Delft. I share this because I've seen and experienced density up close without the need to go high in the air. I've experienced amazing urban squares, promenades, public corridors connecting neighborhoods and retail, or great outdoor plazas shared by multiple restaurants, not just in Delft, but throughout the Netherlands, without the need to exclusively rely on high rises to deliver density. So my closing comment is this. Is this the best plan we can offer? And can we not be more creative in our approach toward further density? I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shea. You have before you run, Councillor McNeese has a question for you.
Through your worship, thank you, Mr. Shea, for your delegation there. So you brought up an interesting point around precedents and not just worried about what happens at Oakville Go transferring to Brawny Go, but you're talking about any major transit thoroughfare. You mentioned Dundas, and we heard a previous delegate say Trafalgar. So you're worried not just happening at Brawny Go, but other transit thoroughfares, did I understand correct?
Certainly Dundas in the future, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Shea. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, Karen Brock.
And following Karen Brock will be Bill and Judy McCreary.
Welcome, Ms. Brock. Council looks forward to your information.
A little stiff from sitting so long. You must be the same. You'll notice that there's going to be some repetition. I'm grateful to the people who preceded me. My name's Karen Brock, and tonight I'm speaking on behalf of Oakville Green Conservation Association, a local environmental charity. Our mission for the past 22 years has been to protect and restore nature in Oakville. In fact, it was founded when the new organization began examining land use planning north of Highway 5. Over the years, in addition to our many community greening and education activities, we accomplish our mission by advocating for protection of Oakville's natural assets, engaging community members, local businesses, school boards, community and church groups, and we partner with various branches of government. I'm appearing here tonight to speak to the proposed Midtown Official Plan Amendment. Oakville Green is in fact in favor of intensification, since it's well documented that building in areas with existing urban infrastructure benefit the community. It saves money from municipal coffers, especially when there's DCs are reduced. It provides people with walkable, transit-supportive communities, but most of all, it prevents sprawl into rural areas, the green belt, and precious farmland that feeds us. Oakville Green realizes that our community, like all communities, must grow by adding jobs and housing, especially affordable housing. We will be welcoming many new folks to Oakville, and that's great, and we know that Oakville has opened its arms to those who choose to live here. The enormity of this upcoming decision to intensify Midtown is obvious, and that's exactly why I'm here tonight. And as you've heard from many delegations, is it 20,000? Is it 60? Is it 70? Is it 90? Is it 120? And I think Carolyn McMinn said 190. Where's the number cruncher? Maybe she's gone. So it's confusing, and I think it leads to a lot of confusion and perhaps some mistrust about what the numbers really are. And having a community that is overbuilt will feel like warehousing rather than creating a healthy, desirable neighborhood. And again, you've heard that theme from many people. The devil's in the details, and we have a lot of questions that we feel must be addressed for this future community. What is green infrastructure, and how does it relate to this proposal? As neighborhoods intensify, the opportunities for green spaces and trees that survive, that is, due to competition are reduced due to competition for utilities. How do we ensure that residents have access to green space and trees and all the physical, social, and mental health benefits they provide? Something that no one has mentioned yet is the QEW highway corridor is one of the most polluted airsheds in the GTA. How will the town ensure acceptable air quality and the health of these new residents in these coming years? I think we expect our leaders to regulate buildings and promise to keep their residents safe. Even with electrification of cars and trains, this airshed will still pose health issues. Oakville Green closely follow urban planning green infrastructure initiatives in Canada and beyond, and we are members of Green Communities Canada. And green infrastructure is about tapping into the power of nature. And someone has mentioned, again, the benefits, whether it be cooling for heat island effect, but it's also way more cost effective than gray infrastructure. What size are the pipes going to be that have to remove the wastewater and surface water from this area? So it's important to get it right. And goodness gracious, another road. I was so relieved to hear Santiago speak to transit options that are future thinking. And we know one more lane, one more road is not the answer. We just have to figure it out. A road coming right through this building, apparently. So I hope that never happens. And we've got to look at other transit options. As Michelle so eloquently said from Future Energy Oakville, green standards, green development standards are the key. And there's lots of examples, as she noted. And then that deals with air quality, climate change, energy efficiency, water quality and efficiency, ecology, and solid waste management. So these are really important things that really should be in place almost immediately. So many questions remain unanswered about this new community. By shrugging our shoulders and saying that we're only creatures of the province, I think it is abdicating our responsibility for our community and certainly our future community. And in conclusion, I hope that many of the recommendations that people before me have made tonight will be seriously considered. But until then, I think it's premature to accept the OPA as it's recommended right now.
Thank you, Ms. Brock, for your information. I don't know if you missed it earlier, but we're not accepting the OPA as it's currently drafted. All right, Madam Clerk, the next delegation is Bill and Judy McCreary. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Grant.
It was more a comment, and I just wanted to say thank you for bringing us new information. Without getting into your group's efforts too much, it was a breath of fresh air. And I appreciate the fact that you came back with that. And it's perfunctory to ask for staff to make sure that's included in the report, because I know they will, but I look forward to seeing it within the report that we get in the future. Thank you so much for bringing that forward.
Let me be the one to ask for a copy of your presentation.
As it is, I might have to rejig it here.
We'll be
but
patient.
I could make sure that could happen, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McCreary, Bill and Judy McCreary now, please. Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
And following them will be Ken Minor.
We're going to split this, and it should be short and sweet. And I'm glad we only did about 2 or 3 slides. Many people have spoken quite eloquently to their concerns and the needs to revise the draft OPA. It was suggested to me by one of the councillors that I include my history. So very briefly, I worked over many years on institutional projects. I've also worked on transit projects for Metrolinx and the TTC, and in the private sector on housing for the Ontario Housing Corporation, office buildings, and while working on institutional projects, courthouses, correctional facilities, office buildings, and hospitals in the public sector. So that's my background. In terms of slide, Judy, you want to say anything at this point?
Oh, okay, I can say.
If you would share the mic with her, that would help everybody hear.
My background is about 25 years in financial services, in both the large corporate and the commercial lending side of things, funding real estate developments, as a matter of fact. And then the last, well, I'll skip 23 years, add them together, as an organizational change consultant, working on a lot of large transformational changes.
So the next slide, I think we tried to keep it simple. Significant variance in the population and density estimates for Midtown. And second point, Judy will speak to later. So we can move to the next slide. Now, I had done an Excel spreadsheet that had more information here. And I had endeavored to get information from the staff because given my historical background, I like data that I can get my teeth into. And then to fit it on this PowerPoint slide and so that people can actually read it, we cut out some of the stuff that I put in an email to staff and to counselors. So it's not as fulsome as it used to be. And given the number of comments by various stakeholders at the podium here, it's fairly clear to me there's a lack of consensus about what the numbers actually are. I based it on what I thought I saw in the public record, the OPA, and any other attachments. Plus, the counselors, Janet Haslett-Thiel and Dave Giddings, were very helpful in their newsletters or emails to the JCRA community, identifying the population forecasts that they had constructed. And then it was very helpful for Ben, I won't even mention his last name because he's Ben, 125 to 200,000, which frankly blew me out of the water. My concern has always been based on the data that the town provided and then what the counselors provided, that there's a disconnect. The metrics are not scalable at all, unfortunately. And I think it's recognized that the OPA is really a vision and that it tries to deal in principles. But when the numbers change so dramatically, especially given what Ben has said, it seems to me that one has to question the fundamentals of the vision of what was written in the OPA. So moving on to the next slide, and I'll go over this briefly, but before I do that, I just want to say that I think whatever the town does must be perceived and perception is real in the political world, must be seen as fair and reasonable. In the public sector, I always looked at everything, what is fair and reasonable? What will stand the test of time? And I think the elephant in the room here is what's called a ministerial zoning order, or MZO for short. What is to stop a developer from applying for an MZO on any site in Midtown or anywhere else in Oakville at the other 5 or 6 nodes? It's a significant question and should be a significant concern. So I'm going to go back to the town needs to proof up its numbers for the data on the population forecasts. Moving on, one, assess and report. I'm suggesting that you hire a qualified third-party peer review subject matter expert, that they assess and report back to council on the efficacy of the population forecasting methodology used by town staff, provide a population forecast at key milestone years, i.e. in increments of 5 years through to 2051 plus if required, review, assess, and make recommendations regarding the validity of the draft OPA, assess and report if the draft OPA may proceed in its current state or if it requires amendments that are marginal, medium, or material, i.e. significant. Make recommendations on approaches to return the OPA to schedule to meet milestone deadlines. If that approach is taken, I think the town will have gone above and beyond what it needs to do. You won't have people taking pot shots at what I say or what the councillors say or what the public says, such as Ben and others tonight, because I don't think there's any logic or consistency to what I've heard tonight. It's very incredibly important that you take what is being suggested to you and do something about it. And I think actions will speak louder than words by council. And I'm suggesting that third-party consultant report to council so that it's very clear and very transparent that council is driving the bus. And what will get built will be based on the financial availability of funding by the town and whomever else contributes. Nothing will happen unless the town puts the financial house in order for these projects in the Midtown. So we're going to move on to the next page, or a slide, and I'll let Judy speak to that.
I'll be short and sweet here. So I think what we are missing, at least I wasn't able to find it, is a real impact assessment to other areas of Oakville. So there's a lot of detail been provided so far around the Midtown itself, but the Midtown development will impact in many, many ways all the surrounding areas. So a holistic impact assessment. And the things I'm thinking of are transportation. We've heard that mentioned certainly this evening. But you know, what happens to if people from Midtown or North Oakville want to go downtown? The logical routes are either Trafalgar or Kerr. They're not expandable. So how do we deal with that volume? You could go over to Reynolds or you could go over to Allen, but none of them are large thoroughfares. So transportation is one. I think there's also a question of the economics for the rest of us residents in Oakville. Who pays for all this infrastructure? I forget what bill it is or what act it is Act 23 or whatever, 23 that now no longer requires developers to pay for a lot of this stuff. So who does it fall on? It falls on us, and we need to understand what that's going to cost us. I think we've talked about environment today. We need to understand what the impacts are going to be on the environment. So I don't actually think we can make final the OPA until you've had a look at what those broader impacts are at various levels of FSI. A new learning for me tonight, but you know, what is the impact if we go with 4 or we go with 6 or we go with 10? Because they will vary and they'll be managed in totally different ways. So that's the piece that I'm recommending, is that we actually have to look at the impacts and do a proper assessment of those in order to have the material that we need to know what's right to put into that OPA.
And I will have one more comment. If possible, I think it's very helpful if the staff and everybody, including people like me, try and use lay language. We heard a lot of acronyms tonight and a lot of, it's almost like you have to, and I'm not a Catholic, it's almost like you have to be a priest to understand what the heck everybody's talking about. It's very unhelpful. Okay? So that's just my 5 cents. And I love Delft. I lived there for a while.
Thank you very much.
Bye now.
Oh,
Bill, can you pop back up here again? I have a question first. Or rather, more of probably a statement with a quick question.
I'm a little wobbly. I got new orthotics. But I could have a good lawsuit, slip and fall.
Bill, thanks very much for your presentation. My antenna went right away with this third party. Peer review. Is this really, I think to me, is probably advantageous for the town to do this for validation. and making sure we're using the correct formulas. So right now, we're talking density, we're talking FSIs, we're talking all these things that are all over the map. I don't know about you, but I'm still confused in how this is all going to blend in and how it's going to work and what's being acceptable of council. So I'm really thrilled on your comments about the third-party review. I think that's an excellent idea. I think it's a quality the town should undertake to validate that we're doing it the right way, because this is the biggest development that's going to happen in this municipality and for eons. So thank you very much for your presentation.
You're most welcome. The only other comment I'd make on that is that I think all the assumptions need to be listed up front. And then I guess you all should take pot shots at them to figure out where the ones are wrong or weak and go from there.
Agreed.
Because somebody, be it the provincial government, the minister, or the premier, may take shots at it. No.
You have strength, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Ken Minor, you are up at last. Thank you for your patience. Council looks forward to your presentation.
The next delegation following Ken is Pierre Savigan.
I'm on turkey time, so it's late for me. I just arrived back the other day. Mayor Burton, members of council, thank you not only for your time this evening, but for the service that you provide to us in this incredible community we call home. Thank you as well to staff for their work. You all have tough decisions to make. My name's Ken Minor, and I'm proud to have raised my family in Oakville for 31 years on Maple Avenue, which would be in the shadow zone of the Midtown. I'm here to add my voice to the draft amendments to the Midtown official plan. While I'm supportive of growth across Oakville, and particularly in the Midtown core, this development, as we all have heard this evening, is incredibly complex, multi-generational project, and I believe the May 3 draft can and should be improved. I submitted in writing 5 proposals, specific changes that I think would yield positive benefits to existing and future residents of Oakville. Given all of the significant and terrific presentations, I will focus on just 2. These 2 effectively amount to putting the horse before the cart. By this I mean, first, mandate the development of a master plan that sets out a holistic view of how this is all going to work. And develop this part as our livable Oakville that we've been talking about now for decades, rather than set a set of specific rules per plot. And second, given the uncertainties expressed this evening about the potential density of Midtown core that will so affect the character of our livable Oakville vision, and the billions of dollars that will be spent building buildings, and the subsequent multi-millions of revenue that will be earned in Oakville, I, like the previous speaker, propose council assign a budget to hire external global experts in urban planning resources to find solutions that will deliver what we see as livable Oakville with strong data collected to support that before approving the Midtown plan. That's where I put the horse before the cart. I want to leave it there. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minor. I think it's safe to call the next delegation. I did pause to check. The next delegation is, I'm told, Pierre Sauvageau. Mr. Sauvageau?
I don't know if he's here, if he left.
I don't actually see him, so perhaps he's not here. The final listed delegation is Matt Stainton. And good news, the clerk has received more volunteers to delegate. Mr. Stainton, you're not last, you're just next. Welcome.
Mayor Burton, Council, thank you very much. My name's Matt Stainton. I'm a resident of Oakville for more than 25 years. I have a business that I started in Oakville about 5 years ago. I have 4 children aged 19 through 30. Two live at home, one lives just north of council here in the apartment buildings, and one has moved out because he said Oakville's too expensive. My thoughts tonight were to come and say thank you to you and staff that have done a fantastic job. The presentation was very clear. You know, there's been lots circling around, you know, how many and what's the density, and I thought it was very, very clear. So thank you. I am in the industry. I'll touch on that very quickly in a minute. I'll give you some context. A 350-unit condo, if it is delayed by 1 month, raises the price for one unit by $5,714 per month, $68,571 for the year. So as we talk about affordable housing, and this is near and dear to my heart with 4 kids that I would like to live in Oakville, I would like to have them raise their families in Oakville, this is the one factor that hurts people: time. Construction, land cost, market-driven. Construction cost, market-driven. It's the process that's killing and hurting affordability. I wanted to stop there and say thanks and great, and I hope it goes from there, but I heard too much, and I'm not great at holding my tongue. I heard a lot of stats released tonight and numbers, and I'd like to give you some context from where I come from. I worked for Canada's largest builder for 25 years, PCL. As I said, I started my own company here in Oakville 5 years ago. I've worked with the largest developers in Canada and continue to do so. I'm not a developer, but I'm a builder, and I work closely with them, and I hear what pains them every day because they're always asking me, how do we build it cheaper? So my ask to council is please listen to the staff. Please listen to them. They are the experts. I was really disappointed to hear a ton of stuff tonight. Very disappointed. What I call misinformation, numbers by people that are not experts. They take simple numbers and they run straight line calculations that don't work. They're not experts in this, and they shouldn't be propagating this information. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's a citizen. They have a right to free speech. They have a right to provide their opinion. But if they're giving facts on numbers that are not correct, that's wrong, because it's in some ways fear-mongering, because then other associations take this, they get scared, and they go running around and start calling you guys every day, telling you what's wrong. I heard numbers up to 125 to 200,000. I saw this on a website, and I called Ben this morning, and we had a great chat. I was ready to go into him. He said to me, he said, I'm not an expert. These are theoretical. Let me point out a couple of things that don't get you to 200,000 or 190 or even 125,000. Servicing is a factor. Angular plane is a factor. Tall building standards, saleability, marketing factors, cost premiums over 40 stories, curtain wall versus window wall, weather days when you begin to go over 40 stories. It drives fear. I heard something today about 68,000 people in 2061, and, you know, will BRT be enough for LRT? Let's really think, if we want to think forward, as I heard many times tonight, let's think forward. 40 years ago to this year, the internet was invented. Nobody would have thought that would be where we are today. We'll probably be in flying cars by then. And if you think I'm nuts, go look and see what they're doing in New Zealand right now. So in 2061, I don't know if we have to worry about BRTs and LRTs. Not bad to think about it, but we need to really think forward. Other things that we hear about. All developers go for full density. No, they don't. I have 4,000 condo units that I'm either building or in pre-construction on. We have 2 projects right now where we don't go for full density. And the reasons are parking issues, servicing issues, and marketing premiums. We have other condos that my client, the developer, is looking at, and they're saying, we can't compete in this market. There'll be too much, there'll be saturation. So that's not accurate information. I hear the old Oakville thing. And my grandfather grew up in Oakville. My father was the director of the Oakville Choral Society for 25 years, and I had great passion hearing them perform at the Performing Arts Center for many, many years. And I get what old Oakville looks like. I live in Southwest Oakville. But the reality of it is times are changing. And this was told to me by my grandfather. And he says, when you get people that just are stuck on not changing, ask them if they rode a horse to work. Because many, many generations ago, somebody's great-grandfather or great-grandmother rode a horse to work. I checked the parking lot tonight when I came in. I saw no horses. So we have to recognize, wouldn't it all be great if the way it was at one point in time? But we do have to change. I heard about low and medium density things. Well, I heard for one of the numbers tonight was we could build a 23, an 18, and a 17-story building, and that would be the equivalent of a 53. Well, you know what happens when you put 3 buildings on that chunk of land? You've lost the park space for 2. Height allows for green space. I will add a couple of other things that I've learned in my years. Be careful on grain standards. I built the Mountain Equipment Co-op in Burlington, and there are no greener people on this planet than Mountain Equipment peoples. And they called LEED, lowest ethical and environmental denominators, because people do things just for a point, to score a point. You need to do things because it's the right decision. Geothermal is a great solution in Midtown because you have rock down only about 12 feet. Rock is exactly what you want. You don't want overburden. I also did the en route along the 401. The en routes, we put in showers and bike racks for staff because it got us a LEED point. I will point out to you that it's illegal to ride a bicycle on the 401. It was done and they sit there empty. So my message to you is listen to the experts. And as counselors, it's hard. You're in a difficult position. Please have the courage when you have a constituent sharing information with you that you know is wrong. And maybe instead of saying thank you for the information, say, let me share with you some information that we've got from our experts, the staff. Might cost you a vote. I'll tell you, if you're my counselor, I hear that, I'll get your vote. You'll get my vote. And if you're not in my neighborhood, I'll tell somebody in your constituency that's the person you should be voting for. So please hurry up. We know that there are provincial mandates for the numbers that have to happen. And if we don't happen, there are very difficult things that happen. And I'll point you to one example. I'm in the midst of pre-construction on a project, 4 towers in Stony Creek on the Leuna Gardens lands. Nothing but low-rise homes around there, and that 90-acre site will now be 4 towers with over 1 million square feet on the water. I don't think the residents of the Chartwell Association or the Coronation Association want somebody to buy up 3 or 4 homes and put up 4 towers for 1 million square feet. The place for the density is at the transit, it is at Midtown. With that, I say thank you for the time, and good luck to you all.
Thank you for your best wishes. But before you run, Councillor Elgar would like a few words with you.
Quick question. What do you think the density should be at the transit hubs?
You know what, Councillor Elgar, I would say ask the experts. But, the thing is when someone talks about a 10 FSI, and again, I'm going to defer to these guys to correct me when I'm wrong, is when you go 10 FSI, it doesn't work. You don't always have these tall peak towers because you have angular plane issues. You have, and if you don't have the 25 meters, or I think in Oakville's case, 30 meters of separation, that you end up with you will have some lower density towers. So, I mean, your own study showed it in the presentation. You're 68,000 by 2061. That's not unreasonable. If we don't put it there.
Do you think the 200 per hectare is accurate? Or is it
yeah, well, again, that was really misleading information. I saw Ben's numbers on Manhattan, and that the density is greater than Manhattan. That's not a fair comparison. It's not a realistic comparison, because when you take Manhattan, that's all of Manhattan. Central Park is 340 hectares alone. If you took Midtown at that density and then added in all of Oakville, well, we'd probably be a tenth of what of Manhattan is. So you have to look at it from that perspective. I'm not an expert on that, but I do know if it's either sprawl. We lose our parks through sprawl, and I know Mayor Burton is a big proponent of parks, so too am I. So if you build up, and the reality of it is, once you go above, and that's when you look at podiums, and I've worked on the TD Center, the Eaton Center, BCE Place, I've worked on many of these towers. When you walk the street, you see the podium. You generally don't see the tower until you're further back. And whether it's 50, 30, or 20, it really doesn't make that big of a difference. What does do it is when you go 50, it allows you some space to put some land here. You heard it today. Somebody said we could go a 17, 18, and a 23. Well, they're all going to have that same size podium because you need it or the building falls over.
Well, so the province says 200 people per hectare, people and jobs per hectare.
Sure.
Is that the right number?
You know what? I struggle to say that because that's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
I'd ask you to look to your staff because.
Well, downtown Toronto is 474.
But
North
again,
York Civic Center is 237. It's extremely similar hectares.
But I'd be
almost the
very
same.
interested to see that boundary when you say downtown Toronto. I spent the first,
Neptus has got it. If you
Pardon me?
go to Neptus Association.
Okay.
They've got all the boundaries all throughout all of Toronto, like every different part. It's really good.
Sure.
And they go through the densities too, so, yeah.
but I think a more in-depth analysis has to be done. I'd be happy to look at that, but again, I'd look at it also in the context of when people provide information comparing to Manhattan. But they're talking overall Manhattan, not the densest parts of Manhattan. If you go to Hudson Yards, where the newest development that Oxford Developments from Canada was involved in, I'll bet you it's over 2,000. I know the people here that worked on it. It's incredible what they've got there.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Councillor. I hope you got what you wanted. Thank you, Mr. Stainton. Madam Clerk, I understand we have fresh volunteers.
We do have Pierre has joined us now. He's at the back of the room if he'd like to delegate.
All right. Welcome, Mr. Sauvageau. We look forward to your information.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor Burton, councillors, staff, and the public. I understand the town of Oakville has pledged to meet the provincially mandated housing target of 33,000 new units by 2031. And as part of this commitment, Midtown is planned to have an estimated number of 13,400 in people and 7,200 jobs by 2031. I know the numbers have been discussed throughout this evening. Can you, slide 2? Now, the official plan amendment, I'd like just to briefly address the self-sufficient urban community, Midtown Oakville Development Application, Floor Space Index, maximum building heights, inclusionary zoning, the Midtown Urban Forest canopy within blocks, and then lastly, the road alignment. I doubt it if I'll be able to go through all of these within the time frame, so I'll just concentrate on where I can. Next slide. Thank you, Joe. The vision of Midtown Oakville is being planned to be an urban community where people are able to live, work, play in walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods connected to the rest of Oakville by pedestrian, cycling, transit, and street networks. The key issue here I've highlighted is the self-sufficient urban community. It's essential for this to happen because I don't want to see Midtown become a bedroom community for the City of Toronto. So it's essential that the vision takes place. Next slide. Midtown Oakville development application. I did a brief summary of the various applications that have been submitted. Either they've been approved or under review. And basically, based on the map there from A to G, there's going to be approximately 4,910 units with varying FSI. Some I weren't able to get. The density is something which I cannot determine because of the FSI. With respect to the commercial and retail, there's going to be 9,414. Next, in regards to office, there'll be 6,449. And lastly, the people in total is 6,034. And the estimated jobs is 479. I have a concern because according to the projections for Midtown in 2031, we're going to have a ratio of 65% people and 35% jobs. However, under current state, as it is shown above with these applications, this is way low in regards to the jobs within the area so far. So it's important if you expect a livable community that there is sufficient jobs within the area. In regards to, I'll just go on to the next slide, thank you. Now, I know FSI has been discussed, so I won't bother too much with this. I know the direction of the town is to use FSI for density. The only thing is, this gives the opportunities for distinctive heights in the building heights. The only thing that I think, personally, that's missing from Midtown is the maximum height. I know you do not want, or OPA does not address this at all, but I think that's a missing element because even with the 10 FSI, the number of stories could be like 60-something, I believe. So I believe the missing element, there should be a minimum, a maximum height within OPA. Next, in regards to, I'll continue maximizing building heights. The schedules L1, L2, and L3, they've revised the land uses and new densities based on FSI. And the revise as well, urban center is a mixed-use designation and the elimination of the land eligible for bonusing we've heard tonight. Next slide, please. And now, one issue that was addressed in the OPAs in regards to inclusionary zoning, according to section 20.3.9, item A, in regards to housing in Midtown Oakville, it states that residential development should include a range of housing options in terms of building types, units, sizes, as well amended design specifically for households with children, which I see is forthcoming. The issue addressed affordable housing. To me, I think the town has pledged approximately 100 affordable housing until 2031. This is such a low number, to be honest with you. I know I've harped on this issue before, but I think the town is missing on the opportunity to show it's a caring community, especially if policymakers do not include measures to inject more affordable housing into the OPA for Midtown. Next slide, please. Now, this is a visual presentation of what it can look like. One thing which I saw in the OPA, section 20.3.7, build form, item I, it states green roofs and or amenity space should be provided on the roof of any building based or above grade parking structure, where the rooftop will be visible from nearby tall buildings. The wording, I believe, on the OPA should be changed from should be to shall be. There's a very big distinction between should and shall be. So as part of the Midtown OPA, as well, I believe there should be define the urban forest canopy. There needs to be a minimum percentage of urban forestry canopy within each of the blocks. I believe Liberty Village, I've read articles saying that green space is very important, and I know the town is very important for the town to ensure that the canopy has grown throughout the time. So I would express my opinion that within the OPA, there should be a need for a minimum percentage of urban forestry. Next slide. I will be running out of time. But in regards to transportation and road, there's one thing I want to emphasize. I know it was mentioned this evening that there's going to be Trafalgar and Windsor as an interchange connectivity for north-south. The only thing is I see the need for more connectivity between north and south. Either that rectangular area that has railway, that road should go over the south service as well as the rail lines in order to provide active transportation as well. It should provide for traffic as well. Like this evening, before I came to the meeting, it took me so long. It was so congested. There weren't any paths so I could get here in a short span of time. So I was panicking, will I get here? That was earlier this evening around 6:30. In closing, next slide, please. I just want to say Midtown Oakville should be a self-sufficient urban community. And this self-sufficiency rests with you as well as the individuals within the town. I just want to thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sauvageau. Let me see if you've generated questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, I understand you have more volunteers.
Our next delegation is Jock McRae, and he will be joining us virtually.
Well, I think I see him. Oh, no, that's Jamie. Well, let's welcome Jock virtually then. Well, I guess he's logging in, I assume. Do you want to substitute? Here he is, appearing as we speak. Jock, we can't hear you yet because there's a little red thing on your microphone. There you go.
There. Now can you hear me?
We hear you great.
Great. Okay, super. Well, it was a great meeting tonight, really informative, and good to see so much participation from the community. The questions I have that I think have been overlooked is we've sort of just concentrated on Midtown, but you know, Oakville is developing every day. I mean, we've got Shepherd Avenue buildings going in, and we've got just right by the GO train, the south side's there. There's all these developments happening, and to me, if we're looking at this high-rise type building in Midtown, how much creep are we going to get with this? I mean, if they're going to do it there, why can't they do it everywhere else in Oakville? And that's a concern of mine, which adds to the density of Oakville and you know, all of our infrastructure. And I haven't seen anything where that's been addressed tonight.
All right, well, we'll ask staff to add that to the issues of concern to report back when they bring back their refined amendment.
Okay, and I got one other thing, flood control. I think the way things are going in Halton, we may have 3 harbors pretty soon. You know, we've got to consider Milton and Georgetown are growing fast, and all that watershed is coming down the Oakville River now. I think Morrison Creek and all these other little places are going to be just totally flooded, and I think the town's got to look at the watershed. I think that's going to be important.
Thank you very much for adding that. You're the first one to frame it that way, and that's useful. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it, Rod. Thank you, Councillor, for the time.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk?
Our last listed delegation is Renee Carlson.
Ms. Carlson, welcome. You don't need to hurry. We'll wait.
I know everybody wants to go home. So I promise it'll be only 5 sentences. Good evening, Your Worship and councillors.
Could I get you to just pull the mic down a little bit so that I could hear you? Yeah, just talk into it. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship and councillors. It's just a remark which came to me after listening to all the submissions. I understand that Oakville is under pressure from the province of Ontario and Doug Ford, and we have to accept that many new people over the next 20 to 40 years. What I don't understand is why we're trying to cram all of those people supposedly to be coming in Midtown Oakville, while we also have other areas in Oakville which are identified for growth, which are nodes of growth. And specifically, I would like to refer to Palermo Village, which as of now is not built at all because it's under appeal, but it's over 100 acres, and it's very well located vis-a-vis transport, as well as there is already an approved Highway 407 high-density bus corridor and Dundas Street high-density bus corridor as well. And also there is Bronte Provincial Park right there, which would provide green space for all people who will be coming there. So my question is, why do we have to accept almost everybody coming to Oakville over the next 40 years in Midtown Oakville, which will really greatly have impact on Old Oakville, of whose I am a resident of 25 years, and for that reason, I'm speaking now, and thank you.
Thank you very much, and I can assure you that staff now know they need to address that for the public's understanding.
Thank you, as well as there is Trafalgar Corridor north of Dundas, which we know will have high rises very, very high, going up to 60 floors. And there's some other around the Bronte-Go station. There are other areas of growth, and I really don't understand why we have to cram everything right here.
So let me try to be full and clear. All of the growth all throughout Oakville is making that clear is important context we see, not just from you, but also from Mr. McCray a moment ago. And staff now understand they need to give you the big picture.
Yes, please. And also, what I don't understand, why we're trying to exceed the mandates given us by Doug Ford, because clearly we're exceeding them by many times.
I apologize if that wasn't clear in the planner's presentation, but that was, they will deal with that better.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
All right. Are there any other volunteers? Anybody in the audience who wants to throw in another word? All right, I'm going to confine the matter to table. Council, are there any issues that, I think we have to trust staff that they heard and took notes and they caught the issues told us. Have any of you an issue that you want addressed that hasn't been already put before staff? I'm going to start with Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Hazat-Thiel, Councillor Adams, and then Councillor Dudek. I think, is that all right? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate it. Again, I would usually yield to the Ward 3 colleagues, but I'd be happy to move the recommendation to receipt as well after we go through our processes here. Again, leave it to them if they'd like to as well. I have a couple of questions. I'm wondering if staff might be able to give us a definition of what a complete community is, because we're hearing that over and over. I've been struggling for many years to still build a complete community in Ward 1, which is very old, older than the town of Oakville. So I would like to understand what we are saying when we mean a complete community. A little more, that would be great. Sorry, maybe we can get Mr. McCray muted or off of the Zoom here so he's not accidentally saying something. Thank you.
All right, we're going to try very hard to make sure that Councillor O'Meara is the only one who has the floor. And I'm confident that staff caught your first one.
We did hear as well about some concerns from the BVRA about ramifications and changes that may leak into the other transit corridor, the other transit station we have in Oakville. None of the changes the province has put in place over the past year was taken into consideration when we brought the Bronte MTSA forward. So I'm wondering if staff can report back on what we might be in line for or have liabilities for with regards to developers deciding to challenge the OP or bring an OPA amendment on what we already put forward in Bronte. I'd appreciate that. I would also really like to understand the full build-out numbers. And I say this because a group of us met with staff on Thursday, and the full build-out number we were told was 90,000. I look at the presentation today, and the full build-out number is 68,000. So in 4 days, staff have gone down 20,000. So I would really like to understand and know what happened in that 4 days and why these numbers continue to change and oscillate. I'm also wondering if staff can just provide clarification on why we're using 1.7 people per unit, and we heard from a delegate today that the province uses 2.2. So there seems to be a lack of clarity with, at least from my eyes, why we're using a different number or why that number 1.7 is being used. And at that point, I'll just leave it there, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hazlet-Thiel, you're next.
Mayor Burton, I've emailed to the clerk an amendment to the recommendations which Sean has put on the floor, and I'd, at the appropriate time, like to read it out to council and the public in regards to striking a special committee of council.
Well, Councillor, I don't think that's in order on this agenda because this agenda is only this public hearing, but at the next council meeting, it would certainly be in order.
So Mayor Burton, I believe that the the procedure bylaw, section 5.10, allows us to strike a special committee of council, and that tonight's agenda is about, and the recommendation does call to receive, and it is pertinent to the topic that is on tonight's agenda. And so I would put to you that it is appropriate for us to put the amendment forward tonight. Individuals have spoken to it tonight, and I would like the amendment to be read into the record.
Counselor, you're, all right. I mean, I am confident that we would adopt it whether now or at a council meeting. If it pleases you to do it now for some sense of urgency, please, you have the floor. It's in order to make your amendment now.
Thank you very much, Mayor Burton. So this amendment is moved by myself and seconded by Sean O'Meara.
You don't need a seconder, ma'am.
Thank you. That the proposed Midtown draft OPA be reviewed by a special committee of council made up of regional councilors and staff as pertains to section 5.1 of the procedure bylaw 2020-01, and that the committee undertakes to report on the town-initiated official plan amendment, Midtown Oakville Urban Growth Center, file number 42.15.59, that should include, but not be limited to, A, a comprehensive public consultation and information sharing and review by external subject matter experts on the proposed OPA, including urban design, public realm, park space, community building, transportation plan, and development density. B, a review of best planning practices for MTSA areas across the GTHA and any other relevant urban plan. C, options to embed in the OPA mandatory climate change initiatives for the area. D, a review of the potential comprehensive community master plan for the entire Midtown area to include phasing options. E, a review of an analysis of Midtown and our six growth nodes population forecast to build out, including the methodology which will assist us in determining the achievement of the mandated town population growth by 2051 and understanding future capacity. E, consideration of the Parks, Recreation, Library Master Plan and Transportation Master Plans currently underway, and the Parks Plan to be reviewed in Q4, and how these integral plans will support a vibrant, livable Midtown. F, an understanding of the required infrastructure timing and the province, Metrolink, and stakeholder commitment. G, any other subjects committee members feel are relevant to make the best planning decisions possible for the future of Oakville and the most favorable precedent for future MTSAs. G, that the committee report back to council no later than Q4 of 2023. And at the appropriate time, I'd like to speak to the amendment, Mayor Burton.
You're at that time.
I think we all recognize that we must achieve our growth targets and that Midtown and our growth nodes are a critical part of our growth plan. As is evident tonight and over the past few weeks, there are significant questions on the population build-out, best practices in urban planning, what will be the impact of the proposed permissions, and what is the master plan for Midtown. We all need more insight and information before we approve the proposed OPA to avoid any unintended consequences. Additionally, the Transportation Master Plan and Parks, Recreation, and Library Master Plans consultations are now in progress, and they're essential inputs into a needed Midtown Master Plan, along with the Parks Plan later in the fall. This is important work. This special committee of council will not result in a delay in, quote, getting shovels in the ground, because the construction of the servicing pipes is more than 18 months away. Regional councilors from each ward on the committee ensures that the infrastructure support and coordination of services is supported. Council will continue to review planning applications as we have been using the current, in effect, OP. We all want to make the best possible decision to ensure the future of Midtown is truly a vibrant, livable neighborhood, a welcoming, positive addition to the neighborhoods that make up the town of Oakville. The committee, through their efforts and collaboration with staff, can make a positive difference for ourselves and the public, and their work will support all of us in making the right decision for the generations to come. And I ask my council colleagues to support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. I will support your amendment. And I wonder if I can put the vote now. Councillor Grant.
If I can just question, and certainly this is all information that the staff has already said they're going to come and tell us about and come back to us with the added layer now of councillors able to insert their opinions, but I'm wondering why the committees are limited to just regional councillors.
Councillor?
So Livable Oakville was made up of regional councillors, I believe. Regional councillors are at the regional table where infrastructure and servicing will be discussed. And it was a past precedent that I followed. I also, every member of council should feel that they could attend the committee, as should the public, because we want to get it right. And I know you want to get it right, and I know the public wants to get it right, but that's how I got to that recommendation, Mark.
Councillor, I wonder if you would accept an amendment to make it a committee of the whole so that every member of council, that no member of council felt excluded.
If people want to come, sounds good. Do it. So, I mean, and
The growth targets affect us all. So certainly I'd like to be able to have a voting voice. And so I'd agree with this amendment if possible.
But Councillor Hasleteel, would you like the member to move an amendment, or would you just change, or would you like to change your proposal?
I'll accept the amendment.
All right. Councillor Adams.
I'm kind of confused as to why this special committee is required at all. We have a full committee here of council, and many of these are items that I think need to be reported on by staff, and so I'm not sure what the purpose of having a special committee is. We should have these things reported on through our staff properly.
Councillor, I'd like to take, it's her motion, but I'm supporting it. I'd like to, may I take a moment to explain why I support it?
Sure.
The essence of her proposal is that we take more time and dive deeper into this and try to weave together some of the, right now the plan is, normally we do an OPA and then we do those master plans. And what the councillor is proposing is that for the comfort of the public and members of council, that we do them all together and let them inform each other. Do I get that accurately?
Yes, and I also think it's time for us to dive deeper and to ask more detailed questions. While I prefer a smaller committee because it's nimble, I absolutely respect everyone's opinion, just as tonight we've had a diversity of opinions. And so the intent is it's going to be hard work, and it's not going to be like 3 meetings. It's going to be a lot of work on behalf of all of us. But together, hopefully what we can do is bring forward some additional information to help us get to the right place.
Councillor, I would add, what tonight has shown is we need this. Public needs this, members of council need this in order to understand it better.
My only point is we have a council, we're doing council work. And I'm perfectly okay having multiple meetings.
Great. Any other speakers? May I put the vote? Any objection to Councillor Hasletteel's motion? Madam Clerk, I see none. That carries unanimously. Council, may I put Councillor O'Meara's motion? I will, as soon as I find out if I can put Councilor O'Meara's motion. Thank you. All right. Normally, we go to the planning director for his input to this motion. Mr. Charles, I turn to you. You can deflect or pass, whatever, but to be helpful, I would suggest that you assure council that you heard everything and you took notes and they will all be addressed. Because otherwise, that list will be another meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you said it better than I did, and I've been taking notes as well as my colleagues here. So I think we captured all of council's comments. Thank you.
Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, rather than going into lengthy discussions around the table to make sure they're accurately captured, I have other ones, but I'm more than willing to give them to them offline and then have that incorporated. I just wanted to leave that open.
We have time for you to list any issues that have not been identified.
Okay, the one in the previous Midtown document, there was reference to community parks. Why was this not carried over into this document? And we've dealt with this, of course, what is the maximum and why go with the 10 FSI? The previous 2013 Midtown proposal defined tall buildings, and it goes into 6.1.3 what tall buildings are. Why do we not have a definition of what a tall or a mid-rise building is so that there's some clarity in regards to that? There was reference regarding the removal of the maximum building height because it generated confusion. I'd like to understand what that confusion was. And what is an educational facility versus a school? Who will decide who is and isn't in the landowners group? And what is the criteria to deem them eligible? And will the amount of density be restricted based on the servicing plan for the area? That's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other members? With Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd appreciate some clarity on Mr. Sprossen's numbers that we could if have staff report back in terms of what is possible based on the various FSIs.
Councillor Giddings, I am certain from earlier conversations that you're going to get that. I mean, this evening in front of us. So
much appreciated.
Good for the belt and suspenders. Councillor Adams and then Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. I was going to add my request in for the comparison of that. I think there's a 70 to 90,000 number, and there's a 125,000 number, and there's a 200,000 number. If we can get a comparison of these things, that would be helpful to the staff members. And then the other one I wanted to ask about is, can we get inclusive of all the reports coming back, an implication of the growth numbers for other areas of Oakville if there are changes to the Midtown OPA that's being proposed? So what happens to the other growth areas and the transit corridors like the Trafalgar corridor that was brought up by, I think it was the last delegate? Thanks.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to reinstate the comments were made by Mr. McCurry with respect to the peer review group or committee. I'd like to see staff comment on that and what the possibilities of moving that forward.
The councillor has the deal.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I'd also like to add to the list, understanding what research and calculations were done that shows that 10 plus FSI is actually appropriate for the landmass. I would like to be able to understand better the section which is 20.3.7, which refers to sunlight and shadowing, and what are other options in terms of separation distance to maximize and provide greater sunlight in the public realm, and in particular in POPs, et cetera. I'm just going down the list to make sure I don't repeat what everybody else had. There is some language in the OPA that may be required versus shall be around the area designs, and I'm wondering why it's not shall be. I would like to understand how much park space, excluding the promenades, is being provided based on the projected population. There is also a section that talks about the phrase timely manner, and I'm just wondering if that can be defined for us as it relates to the arrival of community services or parks, etc. And I'm wondering if there are any other tools we have, and perhaps it's the exemptions that allow us to expand parks and green space. And I'm wondering what is the rationale, or if somebody could, report back again on moving from a station or district concept, which was the original urban strategies plan, and how moving to this plan is actually going to benefit our neighborhood, and the pros and cons of that. Now, that was raised by one of the presenters. And then my last 2 points are, I'd like to understand, it says in 20.3.9, should include affordable, and I'm wondering, and it says, suggest an inclusionary framework should be, but it doesn't say shall be, and I'm wondering if someone could just report back on the difference between should and shall, and are we going to put definitions in the OPA that clarify what shall or will and what should really and truly means in terms of a surety or certainty in what must be required or expectations. And I know that was a long list, and I apologize for that, but thank you for your patience with me.
All right, Councillor Grant is next.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Along with Councillor Adams' idea of having an accurate description of densities, because I've seen emails telling me it's going to be like Manhattan or like China, I would actually like to see a realistic description of what the densities are going to be like. As we go forward, and given that we are striking this new committee, I would like to see what would happen if we reduce densities at this site to some of the other growth nodes we have, specifically because it's my area, up along the Trafalgar corridor. But I'm concerned that if we try and take away density from this one area, we're going to force it into different areas of the town. So I'd like to see how that gets reflected. I know that when we're discussing this plan a while ago, Mr. Charles had mentioned that it's kind of like if you push one building down, something pops up somewhere else. So I'd like to make sure that doesn't happen to us as we plan through this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Elgar and then Councillor Knoll.
Through you, Mayor, I'm very pleased with where we're going with this tonight. I always remember Kevin Flynn when he was a councillor and as an MPP. I always said the people are always ahead of the council. And what we heard tonight really drove home that the people really dug in, and they really helped make me really support where Councillor Thiel's going. We need this committee. We need the Parks Master Plan ahead of everything. And I know I talked to senior staff, and they told me they can show me places where it will work with a certain density and with park staff. And I think what we're going to do, we all get behind it, and our residents will get behind it before we're done in the end of fourth quarter. So I thank her for doing that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Knoll, then Councillor Shi.
Thanks. I'll be brief. I have one thing just to add to the list, and I'd like to see a greater discussion about the aspects of this area in terms of the goals from section Bill 23 in terms of affordability. We had a bit of a chat about that when we did our ward-specific conversation about Midtown presentations coming up. So I'd like to see a little bit more discussion about affordability, how more affordability can be built into this community going forward. So that's what I'd like to add to the list. I just wanted to say that this was one of the best planning and development meetings I have sat in 20 odd years. In terms of the positive feedback from the community, I've sat enraptured by this, and I've made probably 15 pages of notes. I've never seen the community come forward with so many constructive and positive suggestions. I've been in a lot of meetings where there's a lot of no, 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 And today it was, we like it, we don't like it, and these are the reasons why, and here's some suggestions. So congratulations to all of you and those of you who have left for the great work tonight. And to everybody on council, great questions, and I can't wait to see this huge pile of topics and challenges put before the staff and see how they respond to them. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would like to ask staff, so if possible, we can establish a standardized green space or a common space or even park based on the different FSI. For example, if FSI 10, FSI 6 is any requirement, we can have developer to, when they do the design and they have those things to commitment. Like I learned from one of my friends who is doing some design in Hong Kong. So every tall buildings, so every space on the ground is not on the, it's not the base, it's empty the ground. They have to be something to do some green space or common space. It has to be committed by the developer. So that's something I think we can put in the report to ensure our space.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank
Shi.
you.
All right, may I put the vote? Any objection to the motion by Councillor O'Meara? I see none. I declare the motion carried unanimously, and I thank council and the public for the most constructive meeting I can remember in a long time. And I now have a couple of more little housekeeping details that we have to tend to. I need a motion to rise and report. Councillor McNeice, thank you for that. Any objection? There being none, his motion carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and has made recommendations on public hearing item 4.1 as noted by the clerk. We need a mover and seconder to adopt this report. Councillor Haslet-Thiel, Councillor Shi, thank you. Any objection? There being none, the report is adopted. We now need a mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Grant and Councillor Duddick, thank you. Any objection? There being none, the confirmatory bylaw is read, considered, and passed. And that completes the work of this meeting. It's been terrific working with you and the public, and that ends the meeting.